The first thing the camera sees is not an animal. It is a number. 4001, 4002, 4003. A depth readout glowing in the corner of a monitor, pale digits over black water, changing slowly while the ship above rolls in a wind that no longer matters. On the screen there is no horizon, no blue, no surface glitter. Nothing to tell the eye that this is still Earth except the soft rain of particles crossing the beam. The camera is descending beneath 4,000 meters. The line is not marked by a gate. No wall rises from the sea. No creature turns to announce that another province of the planet has begun. The change is quieter than that. It arrives as pressure, as cold, as distance, as a darkness that has already stopped being an event and become an environment. A technician in a dim control room leans toward the monitor. Someone has written the dive time on a whiteboard. A cup of coffee trembles slightly on the table whenever the hull meets a swell. The vessel is alive with ordinary sounds, ventilation, footsteps, radio fragments. The small plastic click of a pen cap. Above deck, salt water hits steel and runs into drains. The sea, from there, would look like weather. Down here, it looks like a substance made of night. And then something pale moves at the edge of the light. Not dramatically. Not like an arrival. It is there, then almost gone. A slow body passing through the camera's narrow permission. The pilot says nothing for a moment. The scientist beside him stops typing. A faint shape returns from the black. A fish, or a shadow of a fish, its body soft against the hard geometry of the machine. It hovers without hurry in water that would fold a human body into catastrophe. The animal has no reason to know it is being seen. It has no reason to understand the ship, the fiber optic cable, the human attention gathered around the screen, the title that will later be given to the footage, the way people in warm rooms will pause when its image appears. It belongs to a darkness older than our tools. It moves as if the world has always been this way. Because for it, the world has. Above the animal, 4 kilometers of ocean press downward. 4,000 meters of water stand between that pale body and the wind. The sunlight that made the day above the ship has already vanished far overhead. The colors of the upper sea are gone. The voices on deck are gone. The direction called up has become a long mathematical fact. Down here, below the depth where many ocean basins become floor, the planet is not blue. It is black. And the black is not empty. It is crowded with pressure, crowded with cold, crowded with particles that were once part of living bodies, crowded with chemical traces, faint currents, burrows, scars, slow animals, patient bacteria, old sediment, new disturbances, machines that arrived briefly and left marks, and more unseen motion than any beam can hold. This is the first contradiction of the abyss. It can look like nothing, and still be one of the largest inhabited places on Earth. 4,000 meters is an ordinary distance in the wrong direction. On land, 4 kilometers can be an afternoon walk. It can be the space between a train station and a harbor. The length of a city avenue. A short drive through neighborhoods. The distance a tired person might cover while thinking about something else. It is not the kind of distance that usually changes the meaning of a body. But the ocean makes distance vertical. It turns a walk into a transformation. It takes the familiar length of a few roads and stacks it above you as weight. It makes every meter count not as travel, but as pressure. By 4,000 meters, the water is pressing with a force that ordinary objects were never made to resist. The air in a human lung, if it were somehow carried there without protection, would not remain a gentle space inside the chest. Cavities would collapse. The body would not negotiate. The laws would be immediate. So no person enters this world as a person. A person enters inside metal, inside ceramic, inside glass chosen for its willingness to be squeezed, inside cables, syntactic foam, titanium, acrylic, pressure housings, compensation oil, bolts tightened with habits learned from failures no one wants to repeat. Even then, the abyss is always touching. It touches every seam. It surrounds every instrument. It finds the smallest weakness. It does not rush. It does not threaten. It merely continues applying itself from all sides, with a patience that can look almost peaceful until something breaks. A machine descending below 4,000 meters is a question lowered into the ocean. Can this design remain separate from the water? Can the seals hold? Can the camera keep seeing? Can the human wish to know survive as hardware? The ship above cannot see the answer. It waits for numbers, images, telemetry. That is one of the strange humiliations of the deep. The place is close in geography and remote in every useful sense. A vessel can float directly over an abyssal plain and still be blind to it. The people on board may be separated from the seafloor by less distance than a mountain road, and yet the truth below them arrives only through machines and patience. At the surface, the ocean gives spectacle freely. Waves rise. Foam tears open. Flying fish break out like thrown silver. Clouds move in the water. The horizon cleans and clouds again. Weather writes itself across the sea in visible moods. Below 4,000 meters, mood must be inferred. A small change in current. A sensor reading. A layer of warmer water where none was expected. The angle of a suspended particle, the way an animal turns from the lights. A track pressed into sediment. A faint mound around a burrow. A smear of disturbed mud where something passed before the camera arrived. There are no wide views down there, not in the human sense. A lamp can make a room out of the abyss for a few meters. Then, the room ends. Beyond it, the black is not distance you can estimate. It is simply refusal. The seafloor may stretch for hundreds of kilometers beyond the light, and the eye receives only a circle. This is why the abyss changes the mind of anyone who studies it carefully. It teaches that seeing is not the same as possessing. It teaches that a picture can be true and still almost nothing. It teaches that the world is under no obligation to fit inside our frame. The fish at the edge of the beam knows none of this. It moves once, with a slight bend of the body, and disappears. The screen returns to black water and falling snow. For a moment, the control room is quiet. Then, someone says the depth aloud. 4,009 meters. Below the bright ocean, below the twilight water, below the midnight where the last sunlight has already failed, another ocean begins to reveal itself only in fragments. Not a world beyond Earth. A world Earth has been keeping beneath its surface all along. The descent to 4,000 meters does not begin at 4,000 meters. It begins in glare. A research vessel rests under a noon sky. The deck is too bright. White paint reflects light into squinting eyes. Ropes leave wet crescents on steel. Someone checks the weather again, though everyone has already checked it. Someone else kneels beside the lander frame and runs a hand along a connector with the concentration of a person trying not to imagine failure. There is ritual in this work, even when no one calls it ritual. Batteries are checked. O-rings inspected. Memory cards confirmed. Lights tested, then covered. Cameras sealed behind clear domes. Weights fastened. Acoustic releases armed. A small tag with a phone number is zip-tied to the frame, absurdly domestic, as if a machine lost in the abyss might drift into a neighbor's yard. The ocean receives the instrument without ceremony. The crane swings it over the side. For a second it hangs between ship and sea, dripping with sunlight. Then it drops. Water closes over the frame and takes the shine off the metal. The deck crew steps back. The winch pays out. The surface smooths, then wrinkles, then looks as if nothing has happened. Above, the day continues. Below, the instrument begins losing the world. At first, the camera sees what everyone expects the ocean to be. Blue-green water. Bubbles, a bright shifting roof overhead, particles sparking in the sun. Perhaps a fish crossing near the surface, with the casual elegance of an animal in the layer where light still explains the rules. Then, the colors begin to thin. Red fades first. Orange weakens. Yellow dulls. The living palette of the upper world gives way to cooler shades, then to a blue so deep it seems less like color than distance. The ocean does not tear daylight away all at once. It edits it, wavelength by wavelength, until the surface is no longer a place above the camera, but a memory the camera cannot keep. At 200 meters, photosynthesis has mostly fallen behind. At 1,000, even the faintest natural daylight has gone in most waters. By the time the instrument continues toward 4,000, the sun is still physically above the ocean, but visually irrelevant below. That is difficult to feel from the deck. A person can stand in sun-burning light and be directly over a darkness no sunrise reaches. The human brain resists that arrangement. It wants worlds to be far apart if they are different. It wants the alien to be distant. It wants mystery to begin beyond the horizon, not beneath the hull. But the ocean does not arrange itself for the comfort of maps. It stacks realities. In the first few hundred meters, animals still negotiate with light. Eyes widen. Bodies turn transparent. Some creatures use the dim glow above as camouflage, matching their bellies to the faint illumination so predators below cannot easily see their silhouettes. Others become mirrors, glass, threads, drifting ornaments of survival. Farther down, light is no longer a background to be matched. It becomes something animals make for themselves. A flash, a line of points along a small body, a sudden blue-green cloud released into water, a lure hanging near a mouth, a warning, a disguise, a false star, a signal meant for another animal and accidentally witnessed by ours. The instrument passes through this language without speaking it. It hears nothing of the meaning. It records only photons. It carries human light into a world where light is usually precise, private, brief. Our lamps are huge by comparison. Crude, flooding, they turn secrecy into footage. They reveal, but they also interrupt. There is a moral awkwardness built into deep sea vision. To see the black ocean, we bring brightness to animals shaped by its absence. To learn, we disturb. To name, we first surprise. No exploration escapes this tension. The best of it does not pretend otherwise. It designs softer lights, redder lights, patient cameras, baitless landers, acoustic listening, sensors that can remain still for months. Methods that approach without turning every mystery into a spectacle. But even careful sight has a footprint. Every image is a bargain. The descent continues. The instrument sinks through cold layers. Its housing creaks in ways no microphone may record. The pressure rises with an arithmetic patience that would be boring if it were not deadly. 2,000 meters. 3,000. The water becomes not more dramatic, but more certain. A storm above can pass. The abyss below remains. That permanence is part of the unease. Humans are accustomed to changing skies. We live among days, seasons, schedules, unfinished errands, meals cooling on tables, doors opening, messages arriving late, weather breaking. We are creatures of interruption. Below 4,000 meters, change exists, but it rarely honors our pace. Sediment accumulates grain by grain. Currents shift with the slow memory of basins. Animals conserve motion. Meals fall unpredictably from above. A carcass becomes an event. A single sinking log can become a temporary settlement. A whale body can feed communities for years. Time down there has weight. It does not move like surface time. It does not sparkle with opportunity. It settles. Marine snow begins to thicken in the instrument's light. Tiny flecks pass downward through the black. Some are fragments of plankton, some fecal pellets, some mucus, some dust, some the collapsed remains of blooms that once floated in the sun. Each particle is small enough to dismiss. Together, they are a planetary mechanism. The bright ocean lives, dies, and sends its leftovers downward. The abyss receives them, not as garbage, as food, as record, as climate memory. A flake crossing the beam might have begun as a cell near the surface, a microscopic plant using sunlight and carbon dioxide to build a body too small for human notice. It may have been eaten, repackaged, excreted, stuck to other particles, colonized by bacteria, changed chemically as it sank. By the time it reaches the deep, it is no longer simple debris. It is a parcel of former sunlight moving through a world without sunlight. This is one of the abyss's quiet engines. Not fire, not thunder, not a predator leaping from darkness. Falling, a slow vertical transfer from day to night. The seafloor below 4,000 meters may seem removed from everything human, but the particles passing through the camera's beam connect it to weather, blooms, fisheries, carbon, atmosphere, warming, storms, rivers, fires, dust, and the chemistry of the surface world. The abyss is remote only to the eye. In consequence, it is connected. Every sinking particle is proof that the ocean is not arranged as separate layers stacked like shelves. It is one moving system, with delays. What happens above can arrive below later, changed, but not erased. A bloom in the upper water can become nourishment in the dark. A plastic fragment can do the same journey without becoming food in any proper sense. Soot, chemicals, microfibers, metals, traces of human manufacture can travel where human bodies cannot. The deep is not sealed away from us. It is simply beyond ordinary witness. And that is a dangerous distinction. By the time the instrument crosses the 4,000-meter mark, the ocean has already taken away every comfort that depends on easy return. There is no swimming upward from here, no holding your breath, no useful panic, no direction the body can choose that would make the water survivable. The world is not hostile in feeling. It is worse and cleaner than hostility. It is unsuitable. A place can be unsuitable without malice. A desert does not hate a fish. A vacuum does not hate a forest. The abyss does not hate a human being. It merely exists under conditions our bodies did not solve. That is why the machines feel so moving. Not because they dominate the deep, because they admit we cannot. At 4,000 meters, if the lander is over an abyssal plane, the bottom may begin rising toward the frame as a pale suggestion. First nothing. Then a slightly different darkness. Then sediment appears in the lamps, flat and soft and almost lunar, until something moves and ruins the comparison. The seafloor is not a stage. It is inhabited mud. The first view can disappoint the impatient eye. There may be no towering creature, no immediate drama, no city of glowing vents, no monster large enough to rescue the footage from subtlety. There may be only a beige-gray plain, small pits, faint tracks, animals spaced so widely they seem like afterthoughts, and the snow falling through the light. But the plain is not simple. Abyssal sediment is a library written slowly in particles. Some grains come from shells that once drifted in sunlit water. Some are mineral dust. Some are volcanic ash. Some are remains of organisms dissolved, reworked, buried. The mud is memory compressed by water and time. A sea cucumber crosses it as if reading by touch. A brittle star lifts arms into a current too faint to see. A small crustacean appears near a rock, then vanishes beneath the edge of the light. A burrow opens like punctuation in the sediment. A track curves away into blackness, proof that something moved before the machine arrived and will continue after it leaves. The abyss does not announce life. It leaves evidence. To the untrained eye, evidence can look like emptiness. This has been one of the old mistakes. For centuries, humans imagined that the deep must be barren, because darkness and pressure seemed incompatible with abundance. Then, dredges came up with organisms. Cameras revealed tracks. Submersibles found vent communities. Genetic tools found microbial richness. The empty-looking world kept refusing to be empty. Still, the old assumption returns in quieter forms. When a place is hard to see, people imagine less is there. When animals are small, slow, soft, or unfamiliar, people value them less easily. When ecosystems do not present themselves in lush colors, they seem less alive to surface-trained emotion. The abyss has never been good at advertising itself. It has no green canopy, no birdsong, no meadow, no charismatic herd crossing in golden light. Its dramas are chemical, microbial, hidden in sediment, slow in growth, dispersed across areas so large that one camera frame can feel lonely while the system itself is immense. This is not emptiness. It is a different density of life, a different tempo, a different relationship between body and world. Below 4,000 meters, the animals that persist often live with an economy that can look like restraint. Movement costs energy. Meals may be sparse. A large fall of food can transform everything locally, but such events are unpredictable. Many creatures are shaped not by abundance, but by the art of enduring intervals. Some have soft, watery bodies, conserving material where a rigid skeleton would be expensive. Some have feeding structures spread wide into faint currents. Some bury themselves, waiting for chemical or physical cues. Some roam over sediment, processing what seems to us like poor material but is, in their world, a usable landscape. Some grow slowly on hard surfaces, rare enough to matter. Some are predators with stomachs capable of accepting fortune, whenever fortune appears. Patience is not a virtue in the abyss. It is infrastructure. It is built into the flesh. A fish moving slowly through the beam is not being poetic. It is living according to math, written by scarcity. The same is true of the seafloor itself. A manganese nodule, lying half buried in sediment, may have grown around a tiny core through processes so slow they mock the speed of industry. Layer by layer, metal oxides accreted from seawater and sediment pore water. The result looks humble, a dark lump, dull, potato-like, easy to dismiss if you do not know its age. But to an abyssal plane, hardness is habitat. In wide regions of soft sediment, a nodule can be an anchor, a surface, a place for animals to attach, a small island in mud. Remove it, and you do not remove only mineral. You remove a structure that may have taken millions of years to form and may support lives that cannot simply choose a new apartment in the mud. Human desire sees metal. The seafloor uses surface. The conflict begins there, before politics even speaks. The camera glides lower. The lander's feet touch bottom with a softness that still raises a cloud. Sediment billows around the frame, pale in the artificial light, then drifts and settles. For a few minutes, the machine has created weather in a place where weather does not arrive from the sky. Small animals react. Some freeze, some flee, some approach, curious or hungry, or simply following chemical traces released by the disturbance. A baited lander would gather them more dramatically, amphipods arriving like a living storm, rat tails passing, eels, shrimp, scavengers of many kinds, drawn by a sudden impossible meal. But even an unbaited frame alters the place by being there. The abyss is not used to hard-edged visitors falling from above with lights. It is used to other things falling. Snow, shells, wood, pumice, dead fish. The body of a shark. A whale. A whale fall is one of the deep ocean's great transformations. At the surface, a dead whale is tragedy or spectacle, a body floating in light, perhaps followed by gulls, sharks, currents. But when it sinks beyond the reach of waves and enters the dark, it becomes geography. On the abyssal floor, the carcass is no longer only a dead animal. It is a banquet. It is shelter. It is chemical island. It is bone, oil, sulfur, microbial succession, Scavenger traffic, worm colonies, time, the first visitors may strip soft tissue. Hagfish, sharks, amphipods, crustaceans, many mouths arriving from distances we do not easily grasp. Later, smaller organisms work what remains. Bone-eating worms may root into skeleton, their strange lives tied to a material that arrives unpredictably from far above. Microbes alter chemistry. Communities shift through stages. A body that once moved through the open ocean can continue feeding life after it has fallen into blackness. There is something almost unbearably honest about this. The abyss wastes little. It receives what comes down and makes worlds from it. A whale fall can be compared to an oasis, but the comparison is imperfect. An oasis has a surrounding desert of air and sand. This is a dark plain under pressure, and the oasis was once a breathing mammal. It sang in water, surfaced under light, carried scars, migrated through seasons, perhaps touched calves with a fin. Then it died, sank, and became duration for animals it never knew. Surface life becomes deep time. That is not consolation, it is continuity. The black ocean is full of such conversions. Sunlight becomes plankton. Plankton becomes snow. Snow becomes sediment. Death becomes nourishment. Rock becomes vent chemistry. Chemistry becomes bacteria. Bacteria become animal communities. Pressure becomes adaptation. Darkness becomes the condition under which other senses and strategies arise. Nothing down there is simple absence. Even loss is active, but the camera cannot show all of that at once. It can only show the circle. Inside the circle, a pale animal feeds in mud. Outside the circle, the abyss extends. The circle is one of the most important shapes in deep-sea exploration. Not because the ocean is circular, but because our light makes it so. Human understanding arrives in circles: a camera view, a sonar swath, a sampled core, a surveyed transect, a mapped grid, a protected zone drawn with imperfect knowledge. We keep making circles and rectangles on a world that moves through currents, larvae, chemistry, sound, and time. Sometimes our shapes are necessary. Sometimes they are crude. The ocean does not become less continuous because our instruments divide it. A track leaving the beam does not stop existing. A current crossing a boundary does not ask whether the map has changed color. Larvae do not respect mining claims. Noise does not stop at the edge of a study area. Sediment plumes do not read environmental impact assessments. This is why the abyss is difficult not only scientifically, but politically. Its realities are three-dimensional, fluid, slow, and partly invisible. Human decision systems prefer surfaces, property, numbers, deadlines, categories, promises. The abyss has gradients. We have permits. Somewhere far from the lander, on another part of the deep seafloor, a hydrothermal vent may be releasing hot mineral water into blackness. Not all abyssal depths are plains. The deep ocean floor is broken by ridges, fracture zones, trenches, seamounts, canyons, scarps, hills, volcanic features, and wounds where Earth's crust is being made or consumed. The bottom is not a flat ending. It is a landscape hidden under water thick enough to make mountains private. A vent field can appear suddenly in a submersible's light, chimneys rising from the seabed, dark fluid pouring upward like smoke, minerals precipitating where hot water meets cold ocean. The scene feels impossible because it violates the old surface grammar of life. No sunlight reaches. The water can be near freezing just beyond the vent fluid. Pressure is immense. The chemistry seems harsh. And yet life gathers. Microbes use chemical energy. Animals cluster where the gradients allow them to live. Tube worms, mussels, clams, shrimp, crabs, limpets, snails, bacteria mats. Different species in different oceans, each community shaped by geology and chemistry as much as by biology. When scientists first recognized these systems in the late 20th century, the discovery did more than add a new habitat to the map. It loosened sunlight's monopoly in the imagination. Until then, it was easy to tell the story of life as a story that began with the sun. Green organisms captured light. Food webs followed. Even when deep animals ate the remains of surface life, the energy still traced upward today. Hydrothermal vent ecosystems complicated that story. They revealed communities where chemical energy from Earth itself could support dense life in permanent darkness. This did not erase the importance of sunlight, it widened the possible. It suggested that the Black Ocean was not merely a place where life endured after daylight failed. In some places, it was a place where the planet's interior fed the living world directly. That idea changed more than oceanography. It changed how people thought about life elsewhere. If organisms could flourish around vents beneath Earth's sea, perhaps hidden oceans under ice on distant moons might not be biologically absurd. Perhaps a world did not need a meadow under a yellow sky to deserve attention. Perhaps darkness and chemistry could be enough. The abyss, in that sense, became a telescope turned inward. By looking down, we changed what looking up meant. But the vent field itself is not an idea about other worlds. It is a place. A chimney grows and collapses. Fluid roots change. Mineral surfaces form. Animals settle, feed, reproduce, die. Communities can be patchy, temporary in geological ways, and long-lived in biological ways. A vent is dramatic, yes, but also local, specific, vulnerable to the exact arrangement of heat, chemicals, current, and life that allows it to be. To speak of vents only as symbols is another kind of simplification. They are not props in a human argument about possibility. They are homes made at the edge of boiling and freezing. The Black Ocean is full of edges, not just the edge between light and darkness, but the edge between heat and cold, soft sediment and hard rock, oxygen and low oxygen, food scarcity and sudden feast, silence and sound, human knowledge, and what still refuses us. Below 4,000 meters, these edges can be separated by great distances or by centimeters. A worm living near vent fluid may depend on a narrow chemical balance. An animal on the abyssal plain may depend on the slow rain from above. A coral on a seamount may depend on currents that deliver suspended food. A huddle organism may depend on pressure so high that bringing it to the surface alive becomes a challenge of physics and compassion. Life down there is not merely adapted to extremes, it is adapted to exactness. That exactness should make us cautious. It means damage does not need to be theatrical to matter. Change a current. Cover a surface with sediment. Remove nodules. Increase noise. Warm deep water by fractions across huge areas. Shift the chemistry of the ocean. Alter the rate or composition of falling particles. Introduce materials that do not belong to any ancient food web. The abyss may look robust because it is vast, but many of its relationships are delicate. Vastness and delicacy can exist together. A cathedral can be large and still have windows that break. Above the lander, the ship drifts. Hours pass. The people on board do small things. They check screens. They eat. They argue quietly about whether a signal is stable. Someone steps outside and finds the wind colder than expected. Someone calls home if the connection allows. A junior researcher tries to sleep and cannot. The captain watches weather. The ocean surface rises and falls over the hidden machine. This is another strange feature of deep work. Most of the drama is invisible while it happens. The lander may be sitting on a seafloor no human has seen. A camera may be recording a species new to science. A seal may be holding by a fraction. A release mechanism may be waiting for an acoustic command. 4,000 meters below, the machine is surrounded by pressure. Above, someone is trying to find the last clean spoon in the galley. Exploration is made of such mismatches, the heroic and the ordinary occupying the same hour. Abyssal footage and instant coffee, a possible new species, and a broken printer. The planet's hidden realm, and a person in damp socks. This ordinariness matters because it keeps wonder from becoming fantasy. The deep ocean is not discovered by a single mood of awe. It is discovered by logistics, maintenance, fatigue, funding, calibration, data management, failed dives, repeated surveys, taxonomic patience, and people willing to care about what may look to others like mud. There is devotion in counting things from the dark. There is devotion in identifying a fragile animal from a blurry frame. There is devotion in admitting that a sample is inconclusive. There is devotion in not turning every unknown into a headline before the evidence is ready. The abyss requires this kind of devotion because it resists quick understanding. A spectacular image can bring public attention, but knowledge comes slower. It accumulates through repeated looking, through instruments left in place, through returns to the same site, through genetic comparisons, through chemistry, through maps that sharpen year by year. And even the maps remain partial. As of 2026, less than a third of the global ocean floor has been mapped to modern high-resolution standards. That is a remarkable achievement and an astonishing limitation at the same time. Satellite altimetry can suggest broad features, but it cannot replace direct detailed mapping. A mountain hinted from space is not a known habitat. A ridge in a coarse model is not a community described, protected, understood. The ocean floor is still full of unvisited topography. Hidden seamounts, canyons, ridges, scarps, basins, places with currents and animals and histories still outside our close attention. The Black Ocean remains geographically unfinished in human knowledge. That unfinishedness is not romantic only, it is practical. You cannot manage what you do not map well. You cannot protect what you have not recognized. You cannot measure change if the first careful baseline arrives after disturbance. You cannot decide that a habitat will recover if you do not know how old its living structures are, how slowly they grow, how far larvae travel, how often natural disturbance occurs, how species depend on features that look, to a hurried survey, like nothing much. The abyss asks for slow baselines in a fast century. That tension may define its future. A ship returns with data, the market waits with appetite. Scientists ask for time. Industry asks for access. Regulators ask for standards. Ecosystems do not pause while documents are negotiated. Nations debate jurisdiction and benefit sharing. Companies describe resources. Conservationists describe risk. Engineers describe methods. Communities ask who gains, who bears harm, who decides for a place no human community inhabits directly, but every human community depends on indirectly through the ocean's planetary functions. Below all those arguments, the seafloor remains particular. A patch of nodules. A sponge field. A sediment community. A vent. A trench slope. A plain where animals move slowly across metal-rich stones that took geological patience to form. There is no generic abyss where consequences happen generically. There are only places, and our ignorance of them is uneven. The lander's lights turn off for a period to save power. In the control room, the screen may show only instrument readouts now. But imagine the seafloor without the artificial beam. The machine sits as a dark outline, in a darkness that does not need to get darker. Marine snow still falls. Animals continue to sense chemicals, vibrations, currents. The world does not become less active because it is not being recorded. This is a lesson the deep repeats endlessly. Human attention is not the switch that turns reality on. The abyss continues between expeditions. It continues when grant cycles end, when ships return to port, when footage is archived, when public interest moves to another spectacle. It continues beneath storms, wars, elections, heat waves, holidays, flights, hospital rooms, weddings, markets, and every ordinary breakfast eaten near a coast. Its continuity is almost impossible to hold emotionally. At this moment, Somewhere below 4,000 meters, sediment is settling. Somewhere a fish is moving through water colder than a refrigerator. Somewhere bacteria are metabolizing in darkness. Somewhere a nodule lies partly exposed beside a small animal, using it as structure. Somewhere a vent is changing the chemistry around a chimney. Somewhere a cable rests across the seafloor, carrying human conversation above animals that will never know language in our sense. Somewhere a fragment of plastic has arrived where no human foot can. Somewhere, in a trench, an amphipod is feeding under pressure that would make our machines cautious and our bodies impossible. The deep does not wait for a camera. It is not a scene that begins when the lights come on. The longer you think about that, the more the surface begins to change. A calm sea is no longer only calm. It is cover. A blue horizon is no longer only distance. It is a bright lid over vertical immensity. A wave breaking against a beach is no longer only a local sound. It is the edge of a system that falls away into places most maps cannot make emotionally real. This does not reduce the beauty of the surface. It deepens it. The shining water becomes the beginning of something larger than shine. A child running into waves is not wrong to feel joy. A sailor is not wrong to read wind. A fisher is not wrong to know grounds. A poet is not wrong to hear longing in the tide. But none of those meanings exhaust the sea. They are the face of it. Below the face, the body is black. We often call the deep ocean remote. The word is convenient, but it hides a problem. Remote from whom? From a city, yes. From a diver, certainly. From ordinary experience, completely. But not remote from the planet. Not remote from climate. Not remote from carbon. Not remote from circulation. Not remote from the consequences of surface life. Water that sinks in polar regions can travel through deep basins over long timescales. Heat entering the ocean can be stored far from the place where it arrived. Carbon fixed near the surface can sink, dissolve, be respired, buried, or returned. Deep circulation helps give the climate system memory. Changes below 4,000 meters may be slow, but slow does not mean irrelevant. Across immense areas, small changes accumulate into planetary significance. A fraction of a degree in deep water may sound like nothing to a person standing in weather. But scale changes meaning. Spread across thousands of miles and immense volumes, subtle warming becomes heat content, expansion, circulation change, habitat shift. The deep is not immune to the century above it. It answers slowly, and because it answers slowly, we may not hear the answer until it has become difficult to reverse. That is one of the abyss's political dangers. It delays visible consequence. Human systems are poor at delayed consequence. We respond more easily to smoke than to chemistry, to flame than to heat stored invisibly, to a dead animal in a photograph than to a changed current, to a collapsed building than to a weakened process. The abyss belongs to the category of things that matter before they become dramatic. To care about it, we have to care before spectacle. That is a difficult maturity. The Black Ocean asks for it. There is sound below 4,000 meters, though not sound in the comforting way of a shoreline. No surf, no gulls, no human voices unless carried through equipment. But the ocean is acoustically alive. Low frequencies can travel far. Earthquakes rumble, ice cracks. Rain becomes a surface texture transmitted downward. Ships add engines, propellers, cavitation, machinery. Sonar sends deliberate pulses. Whales communicate through water's long corridors. Light fails quickly in the sea. Sound does not. This means darkness is not silence. It also means human presence can arrive as noise long before any vehicle appears. An animal that depends on sound for orientation, communication, feeding, or awareness may experience our industry not as a distant abstraction, but as a changed acoustic weather. The abyss hears the surface. in ways the surface rarely hears the abyss. A cargo ship crossing above deep water may be part of a global supply chain, a point on a logistics map, a hull moving containers through commerce. Below, its sound enters habitat. It layers into a soundscape that was never silent, but was not always industrial. The low thrum of human movement becomes part of the ocean's interior. Noise is hard to love or fear because it leaves no easy photograph. It does not float like plastic or scar sediment like a track. It passes, overlaps, masks, stresses, changes behavior, and is gone from human sight before anyone can point to the damage. Yet sound can reorganize experience for animals in water. It can shrink communication space. It can interfere with sensing. It can turn a dark world, already difficult by vision, into a more confusing place by hearing. The Black Ocean is not only black, it is increasingly loud. That sentence should trouble us in a different register than pressure or darkness. Pressure is the ocean's nature. Darkness is the ocean's nature. Our noise is not. Our noise is a decision made collectively by ship design, traffic, extraction, naval activity, energy development, and the assumption that what we do not hear ourselves is not sound enough to matter. The abyss challenges that assumption. It says, "Your machines speak here," whether you meant them to or not. There are also cables on the seafloor. Long, slender lines crossing basins, carrying messages, bank transfers, video calls, research data, grief, jokes, photographs, emergency alerts, arguments, love, rumors, contracts, and the endless flicker of human attention between continents. They lie in darkness over abyssal sediment, sometimes buried near shore, often exposed in deep water. Quiet to us because we rarely imagine infrastructure as geography. A person sends a message from a bright room. Some portion of its path may cross the Black Ocean. This is one of the modern world's unnoticed intimacies with the abyss. We think of the internet as cloud, wireless, weightless, but much of it rests on the seafloor. Human thought, or at least human communication, has become physically threaded through places most humans cannot picture. The abyss is not outside civilization. Civilization has laid itself across the abyss, and yet the seafloor does not become understood by carrying our cables. A line can cross a wilderness without knowing it. Infrastructure can make a place useful while leaving it conceptually invisible. We can depend on the deep while not caring about it. This is a common human arrangement and not a healthy one. Dependence without attention becomes entitlement. The ocean has supported that entitlement for a long time. It carried ships before we understood its depths. It absorbed heat before we understood the cost. It received waste before we understood persistence. It fed us before we understood food webs. It connected continents before we understood the seafloor under the roots. Now below 4,000 meters, the pattern becomes harder to excuse. We know enough to know that unseen does not mean simple. We know enough to know that the deep contains life, records, processes, and vulnerabilities. We know enough to know that disturbances may last a long time. We know enough to know that careful governance is not a luxury added after extraction, but the beginning of responsibility. Knowing enough changes the moral atmosphere. Ignorance can be innocent for a while. Maintained ignorance is not the same thing. The abyss is still mostly unknown in detail, but it is no longer unknown enough for us to pretend emptiness. The old innocence is gone. Something more demanding has to replace it. Maybe that replacement begins not with a policy document, but with a change in imagination. Not imagination as fantasy, imagination as the ability to hold reality that is not immediately visible. To picture an abyssal plain while standing on a pier, to picture nodules as habitat, not just ore, to picture a sediment plume moving through a dark food web, to picture a whale fall becoming community, to picture a cold water coral growing slowly in a current, to picture a vent field as a place where chemistry is not abstract, but lived. Public care depends on such pictures, Without them, the deep becomes a blank space into which stronger interests can write simpler meanings. Resource, waste sink. Route, military environment. Scientific frontier. Each meaning contains some truth. None is enough alone. The abyss cannot be governed wisely by one vocabulary. It needs science, law, ethics, engineering, indigenous and coastal perspectives, climate understanding, biodiversity knowledge, humility, and time. Time most of all. Because below 4,000 meters, time is not just duration. It is part of the habitat. A coral can be old enough to make a human lifetime feel brief. A nodule can be ancient enough to make industrial planning look like a match struck in a cavern. Sediment can preserve signals across ages. Water masses can carry histories. Recovery can outlast memory. A track can persist long after the operator has retired. The deep makes short-term thinking look physically absurd. The abyss is what the present looks like when it has to answer to centuries. And still, the lander sits in its small circle of light. An animal approaches. It is not beautiful in the easy way, or perhaps it is, once the eye becomes less demanding. Its body is pale, its movement minimal, its presence exact. It investigates the changed sediment near the frame. For a few seconds, its shadow grows enormous behind it, thrown by a lamp that would never exist in its world without us. The shadow is false. The animal is not. Then, it moves on. The camera continues recording. Minutes pass with no obvious event. This is where surface-trained attention would grow restless if the footage were shown unedited. The frame contains snow, mud, a few faint motions, the edge of a metal leg, and the immense fact of 4,000 meters overhead. The scene asks for a form of attention that modern life rarely rewards. It asks the mind to slow enough for small changes to become visible. A fleck settling. A burrow opening. A tiny animal crossing sediment. A current turning the snow at a slight angle. A fish passing outside the brightest beam, not quite captured, but not absent. The abyss teaches suspicion of boredom. Boredom often means the scene is slower than our training, not that nothing is happening. In a forest, a person unfamiliar with birds may hear only noise. In a city, a person unfamiliar with a neighborhood may see only buildings. In the deep sea, an untrained eye may see only mud. Expertise does not remove mystery. It multiplies what can be noticed. This is why deep-sea science often feels like translation from near silence. The data are not always loud. A species range shifts. A chemical concentration changes. A camera records fewer animals at a disturbed site. Sediment structure differs. A genetic sequence reveals hidden diversity. A soundscape grows noisier. A current model shows connectivity between places that seemed separate. None of this behaves like a dramatic revelation. It behaves like meaning becoming legible. Slowly, line by line. There is another darkness below 4,000 meters that has little to do with light. It is the darkness of scale. The abyssal plains cover enormous areas. They are among the broadest landscapes on Earth, and yet the human mind often reduces them to bottom. That word is too final. It makes the seafloor sound like the underside of the ocean, a passive surface where the story ends. But bottom is not a habitat description. It is merely the place where our downward imagination stops. For animals living there, the seafloor is not the place where the story stops. It is the ground of everything they know. It has texture, chemistry, food gradients, shelter, dangers, pathways, currents, hard surfaces, soft places, slopes, depressions, biological traces. A few centimeters can matter. A nodule field differs from fine sediment. A seamount flank differs from a plain. A canyon differs from a ridge. The abyss is not one surface, but many landscapes folded into darkness. Language fails because our experience is wrong-sized. We say mud. The animal experiences home. We say deep. The planet contains layers. We say dark. Life differentiates subtle signals within it. The same problem appears with numbers. 4,000 meters, 5,000, 6,000, 10,000. Numbers help and numb at once. They allow comparison, but after a point they become symbols rather than felt reality. Pressure in pounds per square inch, depth in meters, temperature in degrees, oxygen in micromoles, area in square kilometers, mapping percentage, biomass, carbon flux. Necessary numbers. Insufficient numbers. To make 4,000 meters felt, imagine a city standing on end. Imagine towers placed below towers, streets stacked into darkness, the highest roof still far beneath the waves. Imagine walking a familiar road, then turning it downward into black water, and asking your body to survive the journey unaided. Imagine every step adding force to every inch of you until the word distance no longer means travel, but compression. Even this fails. Analogy is a rope lowered into a depth it cannot reach. But it helps for a moment. The abyss is close enough to measure and too strange to feel fully. That gap is where awe lives. Not in ignorance alone, but in the mind stretching towards something real and discovering it cannot stretch far enough. Awe is not a decoration down there. It is an accurate response. Beyond the abyssal plain, the ocean can drop farther still. Trenches are not everywhere. They are long, narrow descents where tectonic plates meet, places where the seafloor bends and falls into hadal depth. If the abyssal plain is the great dark country of the ocean, the trenches are its ravines. Scars, underworld valleys, pressure chambers carved by the movement of Earth itself. Below 6,000 meters, the hadal zone begins. The name comes from an ancient underworld, and it is easy to make too much of that. The animals there are not mythological. They are real, often pale, soft, specialized, and remarkable without needing legend. Amphipods, snailfish, sea cucumbers. Microbial communities. Creatures whose bodies have solved pressures that make human technology cautious. Still, the name persists because the place feels symbolically heavy. Hadal. A word with shadow in it. A word that admits the old human habit of placing the deepest below among the dead, while biology keeps contradicting us with life. The trench is not merely a hole. It is geology in motion. One plate slides beneath another. Sediments are carried, squeezed, broken, buried. Earthquakes can begin along such boundaries, their force traveling through water and rock. The seafloor is not a finished floor under a finished ocean. It is part of a planet still changing itself from underneath. In the deepest trenches, the separation from the surface becomes almost total in feeling. Nearly 11 kilometers at Challenger Deep. More water overhead than Mount Everest, has height above sea level. Pressure beyond ordinary imagination. Darkness complete. Cold persistent. Food limited and uneven, and still, cameras have recorded life. This is the trench's quiet answer to human intuition. Not abundance as a reef would define it. Not comfort. Not spectacle on demand. Life. Life narrowed to forms that work. Life finding margins within pressure. Life reminding us that impossible is often a confession about our models, not about the world. Yet even the deepest places are no longer beyond human trace. Plastic has been observed in trenches. Chemical contaminants have been detected in deep organisms. The hadal zone, once imagined as beyond reach, receives the century above it through sinking debris, circulation, and the long persistence of human-made compounds. We reach the trench not only with vehicles, but with waste. That fact removes any clean, heroic story. We cannot tell the abyssal story only as exploration. It is also intrusion. We cannot speak of descent only as courage. It is also consequence. The Black Ocean does not become less mysterious because it has been touched by pollution. It becomes more morally complicated. A place can be unknown and already changed. A species can be unnamed and already exposed to our chemistry. A habitat can be scientifically distant and politically imminent. This is the discomfort of modern exploration. Discovery no longer arrives before impact. Often, they arrive together. Sometimes impact arrives first. The abyss is teaching us out of order. We are learning how little we know, while also learning how far our reach has gone. That combination should make confidence feel inappropriate, not useless, not paralyzed, just smaller, more disciplined. A careful confidence, the kind that can say, "This is what the measurements show, this is what remains uncertain, this is what risk may mean, this is what should not be simplified." The deep ocean deserves that kind of speech. So do we. Because careless speech becomes careless action. A phrase like barren plain can travel into policy. A phrase like resource frontier can erase habitat before a machine touches it. A phrase like minimal impact can hide uncertainty under reassurance. Language is part of the descent. It either brings precision or it brings damage disguised as clarity. Below 4,000 meters, words matter because they stand in for places few people will ever see. A nodule field cannot correct a press release. A sponge cannot testify. A microbial mat cannot ask for more baseline data. The burden returns to us. The camera's battery continues draining.
The dive plan allows only so much time. Every minute of recording costs power. Every hour on the bottom is held against weather, ship schedule, equipment risk, human fatigue. The abyss is patient, but expeditions are not. They belong to budgets, seasons, fuel, grants, mechanical limits, and the small anxieties of people trying to make rare access count. This creates a particular pressure on attention. When you finally arrive at a place so hard to reach, everything seems important. The mud, the rocks, the animals, the absence of animals, the current, the sediment plume from landing, the small failure of a sensor, the fact that the camera angle is not quite right, the knowledge that returning may take years or never happen. Scarcity of access gives every image a kind of weight. But weight is not the same as completeness. One dive does not know a habitat. One sample does not know a population. One frame does not know a plane. Abyssal knowledge must be built from fragments that know they are fragments. Somewhere in the footage, a small white shape crosses the lower edge of the frame. It is easy to miss. Later, a taxonomist may pause the video, enlarge the image, compare it with known species, hesitate. The animal may be known, it may not. It may be impossible to identify from footage alone. It may become a note in a database, a question mark, a reminder that seeing is not always knowing. There is a quiet beauty in the question mark. Modern culture often treats uncertainty as weakness. In science, uncertainty can be a form of honesty. It marks the boundary of what the evidence can support. It keeps imagination from pretending to be conclusion. It protects reality from being overwritten by confidence. The abyss needs question marks, not as a reason to avoid decision forever, but as a reason to make decisions with humility. A question mark can be a warning sign. A question mark can be an invitation. A question mark can be the beginning of care. The Black Ocean below 4,000 meters contains countless such marks. A sound not fully explained, a species range wider than expected, a community on a nodule field that changes how the field should be valued, a vent chemistry unlike a previous site, a trench organism with pressure adaptations that challenge assumptions, a slow recovery after experimental disturbance, a plume behaving differently in real topography than in simplified models. Each mark complicates the story. That complication is not a problem. It is the world becoming more accurately itself in our minds. If the abyss seems less simple after study, that means study is working. Simplification can feel satisfying because it gives the mind a clean handle. But the deep ocean is not a handle-shaped thing. It is a system of systems: biological, chemical, geological, physical, acoustic, climatic, technological, legal, economic, emotional. To speak honestly about it is to allow those systems to remain entangled. The thought has to slow there. Not every fact should be turned into a lesson. Not every animal should become a symbol. Sometimes a fish is crossing the beam because it is crossing the beam. Sometimes mud is mud. Sometimes the quiet is simply quiet. The abyss does not need every sentence to admire it. It needs some sentences to notice. A ripple in sediment, a brittle star leaning into current, the way a sea cucumber leaves a shallow track behind its body, the soft collapse of a disturbed particle cloud, the edge of a rock dark against pale mud, the blue-white reflection from an eye that has never seen the sun, a cable shadow in the lamp, a small animal turning away from brightness, a crater left by something that fell long ago, a horizon that never appears because the light cannot reach far enough to make one. These are not decorations around the science. They are the physical world. And the physical world is where meaning begins.
When the lander is commanded to return, the signal travels down through water, acoustic and patient. If the release works, weights drop to the sediment. The frame becomes lighter than its burden. Buoyancy takes over. The machine lifts from the floor, leaving behind a small disturbance and perhaps a few pieces of itself in the form of marks, not materials. The ascent is slower than the imagination wants. 4,000 meters upward is still 4,000 meters. The frame rises through darkness. The bottom disappears in the lamps. Sediment falls away. Marine snow resumes its downward motion while the machine moves against it. Animals flash or vanish or ignore it. The abyss closes below. There is something tender about a returning instrument. It has no feelings, but it carries evidence. It has endured what the people above could not. It has spent hours where human bodies cannot remain, and is now coming back with images, numbers, samples. Perhaps nothing spectacular, perhaps something that will matter years later. On the ship, people watch for its signal. Recovery at the surface can be strangely emotional. After all the abstraction of depth and pressure, suddenly there is an object in the waves. Orange floats, a beacon, a frame rising into weather, wet and awkward and real. Crew members work lines and hooks. The ocean that hid it gives it back reluctantly or generously, or neither, because the ocean has no such intention. It simply floats where physics allows. The instrument is hauled aboard. Water pours from it. Hands move quickly. Someone checks for damage. Someone removes the data storage. Someone jokes too loudly from relief. Someone is already thinking about the next deployment. The footage enters the human world as a file. That is almost comical and also profound. Hours of abyssal darkness become data on a drive small enough to hold between two fingers. A seafloor older than human history appears in a folder named by date and dive number. A creature that moved without reference to us becomes a clip. The black ocean is compressed into formats, backed up, copied, labeled, analyzed, perhaps edited, perhaps forgotten in an archive,
until someone, years later, asks a new question of old footage. Archives are another ocean. Deep, dark in their own way, full of things not yet noticed. A camera can record more than the first scientists know to examine. A background animal becomes important later. A sediment feature gains meaning after a new method develops. A sound file reveals a pattern when compared across seasons. The abyss is not only explored at sea, it is explored afterward, in rooms, by people staring at screens, often long after the dramatic part has ended. This is why patience appears everywhere in the story. Patience in the animals, patience in the sediment, patience in the instruments, patience in analysis, patience in governance, if we are capable of it. The abyss is not a place that rewards speed, unless speed is simply the speed of a falling weight or a fleeing animal. For understanding, speed is mostly a temptation. The Black Ocean gives fragments, then asks what kind of people we become while assembling them. There are old stories humans tell about descending into caves, into underworlds, into wells, into mines, into the belly of something. Descent often means danger, revelation, death, transformation, forbidden knowledge. The deep ocean seems to gather these older meanings without belonging to any one myth. It is not supernatural. It is not a moral realm. It does not sort souls or hide monsters according to our fears. But it does transform those who take it seriously. Not because it whispers secrets, because it changes proportion. A person who spends enough time thinking below 4,000 meters may return to surface life with a strange double vision. The ordinary remains ordinary. Emails, groceries, appointments, traffic, weather, small frustrations. But beneath it all, there is a sensed vastness. While a phone vibrates on a kitchen table, amphipods are feeding under immense pressure. While morning light enters a room, vent microbes are turning chemistry into life. While a city sleeps, the deep ocean remains dark, not waiting, not symbolic, not distant enough to be irrelevant. This double vision is not escapism. It is context. Context can be unsettling, but it can also be merciful. Human drama is real.
Grief is real. Love is real. Work, fear, hunger, ambition, tenderness, loneliness, all real. The abyss does not cancel them. It refuses to let them be the entire scale of reality. There is humility in that refusal. A humility that does not crush the human thing, but places it among other things. The deep-sea animal matters in its world. The microbe matters in its chemistry. The current matters in its basin. The falling particle matters to a mouth waiting below. The human matters too, but not because everything else points toward us. Meaning does not require centrality. The abyss teaches that with unusual force. Life below 4,000 meters is not performing for human significance. It does not need our awe to continue. Its value is not created when a camera finds it. Its history is not empty before description. The world was not waiting in darkness for a name. Names help us care. They do not create the living. This may be the hardest lesson for a species that loves discovery. To discover something is not to bring it into existence. It is to arrive late. To arrive late can still be beautiful. It can still be generous, if followed by care. But it should prevent triumph from becoming too loud. Every new species described from the abyss has already lived through generations of its own lineage. Every mapped seamount was already there. Every vent field had chemistry before instruments. Every trench had pressure before descent. Exploration at its best is not the world beginning. It is our ignorance decreasing. Those are different events. The abyss keeps them separate. A second dive begins. This time the vehicle is not a lander, but an ROV, tethered to the ship by a long cable carrying power and data. It descends with lights folded around it, thrusters still, manipulator arms tucked like patient limbs. In the control room, pilots watch multiple screens. The ROV falls through the water column, not free, but held by a technological umbilical to the surface. The word umbilical is used casually in engineering, but down here it becomes strangely literal. The machine depends on the ship for power, communication, direction. The ship depends on weather and position. The people depend on the machine to translate the abyss into images. The abyss depends on none of them. At the sea floor, the ROV's lights open the world more actively than a lander's still gaze. Thrusters stir sediment if pilots are careless. Cameras tilt. Lasers mark scale with small green points. A manipulator arm reaches for a sample, moving with a cautious awkwardness that makes human hands seem both miraculous and imprecise. Sampling is another bargain, sometimes necessary, always consequential. A rock collected from a vent can reveal chemistry. A biological specimen can confirm a species, anatomy, genetics, diet, reproductive state. Sediment cores can record history. Water samples can capture chemical gradients. Without samples, many questions remain guesswork. But every sample removes something from its place. The question is not whether removal is always wrong. The question is whether it is worthy of the cost. In a shallow tide pool, a careless hand can return a stone and imagine the world repaired. In the abyss, the same casual confidence is dangerous. A sponge may have grown slowly for decades or centuries. A coral can be fragile, ancient, and easily broken. A vent community may be localized. A nodule taken as a geological specimen may also be microhabitat. A sediment core may disturb a small patch that matters to animals we barely notice. Care in the deep requires imagination at small scale. It requires asking not only what can be taken, but what relationships are altered by taking. The ROV hovers over a nodule field. The lights reveal dark, rounded stones scattered across pale sediment. At first, they look inanimate in the simple way stones do. Then the camera moves closer. A stalk, a sponge, a small anemone, fine sediment around bases, tracks weaving between stones, a landscape of attachment and passage. Industry sees concentration. Ecology sees relationship. Both are observations. Only one is complete enough to make ethical decisions. The manipulator arm pauses. In the control room, someone decides what to collect. That pause is civilization in miniature. A hand extended by machine, hovering over a world that cannot stop it. Restraint, if it comes, has to come from the hand, not from the abyss. The ROV moves on. Ahead, the plane rises slightly. A low ridge interrupts the sediment. Hard substrate appears, and with it, more attached life. Sponges, corals, crinoids perhaps, depending on the region. Animals that use current like a delivery system. Their bodies are arranged not for drama, but for feeding in water that carries suspended particles. They stand in the dark, as if listening with their shapes. A deep coral does not resemble the tropical reef of postcards. There is no bright swarm of sunlight fish, no warm shallows, no turquoise roof. There is white, orange, red, perhaps in artificial light, though red would not mean the same in darkness. There is branching structure in cold water, built slowly, vulnerable to contact, to sediment smothering, to changes in current and chemistry. Such habitats can be biodiversity centers in the deep. They are also easy to damage by bottom contact fishing gear, mining disturbances, cable routes, or poorly planned activities. A structure that took centuries to grow can break in seconds. That sentence has been true in many ecosystems, but in the deep it carries an extra ache because recovery may move at the pace of the place itself. Slow damage is not required. Fast damage can be enough. Slow recovery follows. The ROV's camera lingers. This lingering feels important, not the grab, not the claim, but the dwell. The willingness to let the habitat occupy time. To let an animal remain on screen after it has been identified. To allow the unfamiliar shape to become less like a specimen and more like a presence. There is science in this, and also something adjacent to reverence, though scientists may use more cautious words. Observation without immediate extraction. Attention as a form of respect. The frame holding still while marine snow falls between the lens and the living branches. The abyss changes under sustained attention. The first minute says, strange. The fifth says, inhabited. The 10th says, specific. The longer you watch, the harder it becomes to use careless categories. And the harder careless categories become, the harder careless decisions should become. That is the hope, at least. It is not guaranteed. Human beings have often seen clearly and still chosen badly. Visibility is not morality. But invisibility makes bad choices easier. It lets simplification proceed without embarrassment. It lets destruction stay abstract. It lets costs be placed where cameras are rare. The deep asks whether we can extend moral attention beyond ordinary visibility. That is not a scientific question alone. It is a test of imagination. The ROV crosses a scar. Perhaps it is natural, a slide mark, a current feature, a place where sediment shifted. Perhaps it is human, a track from an earlier experiment, a drag mark, a wound from equipment. Without context, the camera cannot know. The seafloor keeps both natural and human records, and part of studying it is learning to tell them apart. Sediment disturbance can last. In some deep sea settings, tracks from old experiments remain visible for decades. The abyss does not always erase quickly. There may be little wave action, slow sedimentation, low energy conditions. A mark can persist beyond the memory of its maker. This persistence should change how we think about impact. On land, tire tracks can disappear with rain, vegetation, traffic, repair. In the abyss, time may not heal in familiar ways. A track can become a long-lived feature. A plume can move through a system slowly. Removed nodules may not return on any human timescale. A broken coral cannot be replaced by planting a sapling next spring. The deep complicates the reassuring word restoration. Restoration belongs to places where return is possible at the scale of concern. In parts of the abyss, return may be too slow for the word to remain honest. This does not mean all activity must cease everywhere. It means the burden of proof becomes heavy. It means uncertainty should not be rounded down because the habitat is dark. It means precaution is not sentiment, but proportional reasoning in a place where mistakes may outlive the people who made them. The ROV's lights catch a cloud of disturbed sediment. For a few seconds, even the artificial daylight fails. The scene becomes a swirl of particles, white flecks near the lens, opaque water beyond. This is what a plume does to vision at small scale. At larger scale, sediment plumes from industrial activity could affect animals through smothering, clogging feeding structures, changing chemistry, reducing visibility, altering food delivery, or producing consequences that vary by topography and current. The details matter. They always matter. The abyss refuses simple reassurance and simple catastrophe alike. It asks for careful measurement and for humility before what measurement has not yet captured. A third scene. No vehicle now. only sound. A hydrophone hangs in deep water, listening. It does not need light. It does not care about the camera's blindness. It records pressure waves moving through the ocean, distant ships, whale calls, seismic murmurs, the crack of ice, perhaps rain, perhaps sounds whose source requires analysis. The deep becomes audible in a way it is not visible. Sound changes the imagination of darkness. A black room may feel empty until you hear movement. The ocean's darkness contains movement even when the eye has nothing to report. Hydrophones remind us that life and geology do not require visibility to be active. They also reveal how far human sound travels. The deep ocean, once thought of as remote, is crossed by our acoustic signatures. Shipping lanes can raise background noise. Sonar can be intense. Industrial operations add pulses and machinery. The result is not one uniform effect. Different frequencies, species, distances, depths, and contexts matter. But the broad truth remains: sound is a way our civilization enters the dark. We may not see the abyss. The abyss may hear us. That thought should produce an unusual kind of responsibility. Not the responsibility of footprints, but of presence without touch. The responsibility of not assuming that invisible influence is harmless. The responsibility of designing quieter systems where possible, regulating intense sounds, understanding migration and communication, treating soundscapes as habitats rather than empty channels. A soundscape is not scenery, it is a condition of life. For whales, fish, invertebrates, and many marine animals, sound can matter as much as light matters to us. In the abyss, where sunlight is absent and vision is limited by darkness and particles, vibrations and chemical cues may carry essential information. To change the acoustic world is to change part of the sensory environment. The black ocean is not a void waiting to receive noise. It is already full of signals. We add ours loudly, often carelessly. The hydrophone continues listening after the ship leaves. That is one of the virtues of instruments left behind. They remain when human attention would otherwise move on. They gather the long story, the daily pattern, the seasonal change, the rare event, the gradual increase, the sudden anomaly. The difference between a place visited once and a place observed over time. Observation over time is how a hidden world becomes less easy to lie about. A single expedition can be dismissed, exaggerated, misunderstood. A long record becomes harder to ignore. It shows variability. It shows baseline. It shows disturbance. It gives policy something firmer than impression. It gives future scientists a past to compare with. The abyss needs pasts. Not because it lacks them, but because we lack records of them. The seafloor itself has records, but not in a language that yields quickly. A sediment core drawn from abyssal mud is a narrow column of time. Layer upon layer, particles settled from above, volcanic ash, microfossils, mineral grains, chemical signals. To the untrained eye, the core may look like mud in a tube. To specialists, it can hold clues about climate, circulation, productivity, dust, oxygen, extinctions, and change across timescales far beyond a human memory. The abyss is slow, but not blank. It remembers through accumulation. This should alter the feeling of mud. Mud is often the material humans step around, wash off, ignore in the deep sea. Mud can be archive, habitat, feeding ground, carbon store, microbial world. It can contain organisms living within it, chemical gradients, burrows, traces of movement. It can preserve histories of the planet that no written archive approaches. To disturb it is not always wrong. Science disturbs to learn. But disturbance without humility is illiteracy with machinery. A core is lifted to the deck. It is labeled, capped, stored, split, sampled. People examine color changes, grain size, microfossils, chemistry. The deep returns to the surface as material that can be refrigerated, scanned, photographed, described. The black ocean becomes a cylinder on a lab bench. Again, the scale collapses. A planet-sized process held in two hands. This is one of science's miracles and dangers. It makes the enormous accessible by reducing it to samples. Without reduction, knowledge would be impossible. With only reduction, wonder and context can be lost. A good scientist, a good storyteller, a good decision-maker must move between scales without confusing them. The sample matters. The place matters more than the sample. The data matter. The living system is not the data. The map matters. The territory remains wet, dark, pressurized, and alive beyond the map's clean lines. Confusing representation with reality is one of the great temptations of power. The abyss resists it, but only if we let it. A map of the seafloor can look complete on a screen. Colors indicate depth. Shading suggests relief. Names appear. Trenches, ridges, basins. The human eye relaxes because the unknown has become graphic. But a mapped surface is not the same as a known world. A high-resolution bathymetric map can show form. It does not automatically show life. It can guide exploration. It cannot replace it. A mountain under the sea is not just a bump in data. It may alter currents, gather animals, create habitat, influence dispersal, host corals or sponges, act as a waypoint for species, or remain largely unexplored despite appearing as a neat shape on a chart. Modern mapping is a beginning, not an ending. 4,000 meters below the surface, a seamount can rise from abyssal depths like a hidden country. Its slopes change water flow. Currents accelerate, eddy, lift particles, deliver food. Hard rock interrupts sediment. Animals attach. Predators patrol. Biological communities may differ with depth, slope, exposure, summit conditions. The seamount's shape matters because water is moving over it, and in the ocean, moving water is not background. It is delivery, communication, dispersal, force. A seamount may never break the surface and still structure life. Humans often notice mountains because they interrupt sky. Underwater mountains interrupt currents. Their importance is less visible but not smaller for the animals that use them. Some seamounts have been damaged by bottom trawling, where heavy gear can break slow-growing corals and sponges. The damage is not abstract. It is physical. Branches snapped. Structures flattened. Habitats simplified. The deep does not need mining to be vulnerable. It has already encountered other forms of human reach. The Black Ocean holds many histories of contact. Fishing, cables, military activity, waste, scientific sampling, potential mining, climate change, noise. Each contact has its own scale and consequence. None should be merged into a single guilt-shaped shadow. Precision matters here too. But together they end the fantasy of an untouched deep. The better question is not whether the deep has been touched. It has. The question is whether future touch becomes wiser. Wisdom may sound too gentle for governance, but in the abyss it has practical content. It means baseline research before disturbance. It means protected areas designed around ecological knowledge rather than leftover convenience. It means monitoring that can detect change. It means transparency in data. It means caution with claims of low impact. It means acknowledging that uncertainty cuts against recklessness, not in favor of it. It means learning from experimental disturbances and from damaged deep habitats. It means including the deep in climate thinking, biodiversity agreements, and public imagination. Most of all, it means rejecting the idea that darkness lowers obligation. A place does not become ethically smaller because it is hard to film. This is where the Black Ocean becomes a mirror. not because it reflects our faces. It does not. Below 4,000 meters, there is no surface to flatter us with ourselves. It mirrors our behavior in another way. It shows what we do when no landscape can easily accuse us. It shows whether care depends on witness. It shows whether value must become visible before it becomes real in policy. The abyss asks quietly, and perhaps that is why the question is so difficult. Loud places can demand protection. Charismatic animals can gather sympathy. Forests can burn in photographs. Beaches can fill with plastic visible to a child. Coral reefs can bleach in colors painful enough to circulate globally. But a sediment community below 4,000 meters cannot make a viral image of gradual loss. A nodule field before and after disturbance may not move the public heart unless the public has learned what it is seeing. Education becomes part of protection. Not propaganda. Not simplification into monsters and miracles only. Education that teaches people how to care about subtle worlds. The abyss may require a more adult kind of wonder. Wonder without possession. Wonder with patience. Wonder that can survive a frame of mud. Wonder that can look at a slow animal and not demand that it become dramatic. Wonder that can care about chemistry, current, sound, sediment, and the very unphotogenic labor of governance. This kind of wonder is harder to market. It is also harder to exhaust. Spectacle fades. Attention deepens. The black ocean rewards depth of attention more than speed of astonishment. Another image arrives. A Haddle snailfish appears in the lights of a deep vehicle, pale and delicate, moving over a trench floor where pressure exceeds what most machines can tolerate. Its body looks almost improbable, soft against a world humans imagine as crushingly hard. It does not look like a conqueror of extremes. It looks like an answer quietly fitted to conditions. That is what adaptation often is. Not triumph. Fit. A body fitting a pressure, a temperature, a food supply, a darkness, a chemical environment, a reproductive challenge. The abyss is full of such fits. Some are elegant, some grotesque to surface taste, some invisible without microscopes, some written into proteins and membranes, some into behavior. We tend to admire adaptation most when it looks dramatic. Teeth, lights, giant eyes, transparent bodies, but many of the deepest adaptations are biochemical, subtle, difficult to narrate visually. Molecules stabilized under pressure, enzymes functioning where ours would fail, membranes adjusted, compounds that protect proteins, life-solving physics at scales the camera cannot show. The visible animal is only the surface of an invisible success. This is another reason the abyss enlarges humility. Human beings are proud of technology, and rightly. A vehicle that can reach the trench is a stunning achievement. But the animal living there does not visit inside a pressure hull. It is not protected from the abyss. It is of the abyss. Its body is not a fortress against the world. It is a negotiation with the world so complete that removing it can destroy the negotiation. A deep organism brought to the surface may not survive the release from pressure. The surface can be lethal to the deep, just as the deep is lethal to us. This symmetry is worth holding. We call the abyss extreme because it is extreme for us. For its inhabitants, the surface is extreme. Warm, bright, under-pressured, violent with light, full of fast predators and turbulence and atmospheric weather. A world of expansion and glare, a world where their bodies may come apart not because they are weak, but because they are faithful to another set of conditions. Extreme is perspective wearing a lab coat. The black ocean is not a broken version of our world. It is its own normal. The word alien comes easily, but it can mislead. Below 4,000 meters is not elsewhere in the cosmic sense. It is the same planet, the same gravity, the same water cycle, the same Earth whose surface holds cities and forests and fields. Calling it alien may express wonder, but it can also distance responsibility. If it is alien, perhaps it does not belong to us. If it is alien, perhaps what happens there is outside the moral weather of the surface. It is not outside. It is Earth. Not Earth as scenery. Earth as volume. Earth as pressure. Earth as darkness inhabited. Earth as a place where most of the living room, by volume, does not resemble the rooms we evolved to occupy. This realization can feel disorienting. We live on the thin-lit edge of a planet with a huge, dark interior ocean. Land feels like the main story because land is where our feet work. But the ocean's volume dwarfs our ordinary sense of habitat. The deep is not a marginal annex. It is a major condition of the planet. We are coastal in our imagination even when we are inland. We know the ocean by edges, beaches, cliffs, harbors, storms, fish markets, maps, satellite images, weather reports, shipping news, memories of salt on skin. Edges matter. They are real. But they are not the whole. Below the edge, the ocean becomes too thick for everyday emotion. The task is to let emotion thicken with it, not to pretend we can feel 4,000 meters all at once. We cannot. But we can stop flattening it. We can learn the names of layers, not as school facts, but as changes in reality. Epipelagic, mesopelagic, bathypelagic, abyssopelagic, hadal, sunlit, twilight, midnight, abyssal, trench. Different terms, imperfect boundaries, useful because they remind us that down is not one place. A single word, deep, is too blunt for care. Care needs contour. The ROV travels along a slope now. The seafloor angles upward. Sediment gives way to rock in places. The pilot adjusts thrusters gently to avoid stirring too much. A manipulator arm folds closer. Lights catch a crinoid, feathery arms extended into water. The animal seems floral, but the resemblance is surface poetry, not biology. It is feeding, not blooming. It is an animal making a net of itself. Nearby, a small fish rests near the bottom. It does not flee immediately. Its world is not accustomed to large, bright metal animals, but neither is every response panic. Some deep creatures approach lights. Some avoid them. Some freeze. Some are drawn to bait. Behavior is not uniform. The deep is not one mood. A shrimp flashes. The light is brief, greenish, nearly gone before the mind understands it. Bioluminescence is common in much of the deep ocean, but common does not mean ordinary in feeling. Each glow is biochemical work. A molecule, an enzyme, oxygen, cellular control, ecological purpose. Light made not for beauty in our eyes, but for survival in theirs. Communication, camouflage, misdirection, courtship, alarm, lure, a living verb in darkness. Our own lights flatten this language. A flood lamp makes everything visible in the same grammar. It turns a world of signals into a scene. Useful, yes, often necessary. But something is lost. Imagine trying to understand a whispered conversation by turning on a stadium light. You may see the speakers clearly. You may also destroy the conditions under which the conversation was happening. This is why low-light cameras, red illumination, autonomous platforms, and less intrusive methods matter. Technology can become more polite. It can learn from the place rather than merely overpowering it. The future of deep-sea exploration may depend not only on going deeper or seeing farther, but on disturbing less. Restraint can be an engineering goal. Gentleness can be technical. That thought is worth keeping. Human technology is often praised for force, stronger hulls, brighter lights, bigger collectors, louder sonars, more powerful thrusters. But below 4,000 meters, intelligence may also mean softness. Remaining still. Listening longer. sampling less destructively. Sharing data. Designing machines that understand their presence as an event in another world. A quiet machine may teach us more than a dominant one. The abyss does not need us to arrive loudly to prove we arrived. The camera continues. Another stretch of plain. Another animal. Another span of apparent emptiness. A slow pan reveals nothing large. Then, near the edge of the frame, a delicate structure rises from sediment. Perhaps a sponge, perhaps a coral, perhaps something that would require closer examination. It is small, but it changes the scale of the scene. The plane is not monotonous anymore. It is punctuated by lives rooted in opportunity. The operator centers it. The science team speaks in low voices. Is it attached to a nodule? Is there sediment around the base? Can the lasers measure it? Has this species been recorded here before? The questions are practical and intimate at once. Such moments are the real pulse of exploration. Not the dramatic discovery alone, but the formation of better questions. The abyss does not hand over meaning fully labeled. It gives an image, a sample, a signal, a pattern. Humans gather around it and try to ask correctly. Asking correctly is harder than it sounds. A bad question can reduce a place. How much ore is here? How fast can it be extracted? How many animals are in the way? These may be questions some institutions ask, but other questions must stand beside them with equal force. What lives here? What depends on what? How old are these structures? How connected is this site to others? What disturbances has it already experienced? How would recovery be measured? What cannot be measured yet? Who benefits from risk? Who speaks for future loss? What would restraint cost? And what would recklessness cost if the deep could invoice us in centuries? Questions shape futures. The abyss, silent as it seems, is vulnerable to the shape of our questions. This is why scientists often resist simple narratives, not because they dislike clarity, but because clarity purchased by excluding complexity becomes false. The deep ocean is full of trade-offs, unknowns, regional differences, taxonomic uncertainties, technological limits, and moral stakes. A cinematic story can carry those things if it does not rush them into slogans. Below 4,000 meters, even the facts need atmosphere around them. Pressure is not only a number, it is a condition touching every organism and instrument. Darkness is not only lack of light, it is a sensory environment. Cold is not only temperature, it is metabolism, circulation, material stress. Food scarcity is not only low biomass, it is behavior, body plan, patience. Mapping percentage is not only progress, it is a measure of how much remains poorly seen. Mining is not only minerals, it is habitat, governance, uncertainty, appetite, and time. The abyss is scientific and emotional at once because it is real. Reality does not separate cleanly into our categories. The water does not know which department studies it. It only moves. A current passes over the seafloor, almost invisible. Marine snow angles. Suspended particles drift sideways. For the animals, this current is not a background detail. It may carry food, larvae, chemical cues, oxygen, sound. It may shape where bodies can feed, where sediment settles, where plumes travel, where contaminants spread. Currents make the abyss less still than it looks. Stillness is another surface illusion. Because the camera is moving slowly and the animals conserve energy, the deep can seem stopped. But water is always in relation. Deep currents connect basins. Internal waves pass. Tides reach downward. Dense waters move along the bottom. Turbulence occurs around rough topography. Seamounts and ridges shape flow. The abyss may be dark, but it is not static. This matters for life. It also matters for harm. A disturbance does not necessarily remain where it begins. A plume can move. A sound can travel. A chemical trace can disperse. A larva can connect populations across distances. A protected area may be affected by what happens outside it. A mining claim may sit within a larger fluid neighborhood. The ocean makes boundaries porous. Human systems rely on lines. The deep relies on movement. This mismatch does not make governance impossible. It makes simple governance inadequate. It calls for networks of protection, adaptive monitoring, precaution around uncertainty, and an understanding that a place underwater is not an island simply because a map draws a polygon. The Black Ocean is connected in ways the eye cannot verify. This is why models matter, and why models must remain humble. They can reveal pathways, estimate dispersal, forecast plume behavior, identify vulnerable habitats, connect limited observations into wider understanding. But a model is not the water. It is a disciplined guess constrained by data, assumptions, and equations. Useful, necessary, partial, the abyss should make us grateful for models and suspicious of anyone who treats them as omniscient. That balance is hard. It is also the only honest one. Honesty in the deep is often a matter of scale. Knowing when a claim applies, knowing where it does not, knowing how much evidence it deserves, knowing which silence is lack of data and which silence is a real absence. The abyss is full of both. No animal in the frame may mean none are nearby, or that the animal avoided the light, or that the time of day matters, or that the camera angle missed the burrow, or that the habitat is naturally sparse, or that disturbance changed behavior, or that the survey duration was too short. A frame is evidence. It is not omniscience. This should be written above every deep-sea image, not to weaken it, to make it truer. The ROV rises from the seafloor and moves toward a darker shape ahead. At first, it seems like a low hill. Then, the lights catch texture. Rock, old lava perhaps, or exposed basement, or a ridge feature depending on the region. The sediment thins. Attached animals appear more frequently. The seafloor becomes less like a plain and more like architecture. Architecture is a human word, but it helps for a second. The rock gives the water something to meet. The current bends. Food delivery changes. Animals use elevation. Shadows multiply. The habitat becomes three-dimensional at the scale of bodies. In the abyss, hard ground can be precious, not because soft sediment lacks life, but because difference creates possibility. A stone, a nodule, a whalebone, a shipwreck, a vent chimney, a carbonate outcrop, a basalt wall, each can offer a surface or chemistry or shelter that changes local life. The deep ocean may seem uniform until structure appears. Then structure becomes destiny. A shipwreck below 4,000 meters is another kind of structure. Human catastrophe or history becomes habitat. Metal hulls become surfaces. Wood decays or persists depending on conditions. Objects made for sunlight and air settle into darkness and are colonized by organisms indifferent to human narratives. A vessel that once carried cargo, war, migration, ambition, or ordinary labor becomes a reef-like feature in the deep. The abyss absorbs history physically. This can feel eerie because human objects down there appear out of place and completely placed at the same time. A bottle, a boot, a crate, a plate, a cable, a piece of wreckage. They are artifacts of surface intention lying in a world with no context for intention. The deep does not interpret them. It incorporates surfaces, shadows, chemicals, hazards. A shipwreck may preserve memory, but it also becomes ecology. A plastic bag may resemble a jellyfish for a moment in a light beam, but it is not part of an ancient adaptation. It is modern persistence drifting into old darkness. Trash in the abyss is more unsettling than trash on a beach, in one respect. On a beach, it is an offense in a familiar place. In the abyss, it is proof that there may be no outside left. We have made materials capable of traveling beyond our body's reach. Our waste is more abyssal than we are. That should make us uneasy, not because guilt is useful by itself, Because unease can become attention. And attention can become changed behavior if it does not collapse into despair. Despair is another simplification. It declares the future finished and excuses the present from discipline. The abyss does not need despair. It needs seriousness. The difference is important. Seriousness can still act. It can fund research. It can reduce pollution. It can regulate noise. It can improve fisheries management. It can create protected areas. It can pause extraction until knowledge and governance are adequate. It can design monitoring. It can teach the public to see subtle places. It can separate necessary uses from careless ones. It can hold companies and governments to standards that respect uncertainty rather than exploit it. Seriousness is slower than panic. It lasts longer. The abyss deserves lasting emotions, not a burst of horror, a sustained regard. The ROV turns back. Mission time is running low. The pilot begins the return path. The camera gives one last look at the seafloor. Sediment, rock, animals, snow, blackness beyond the lamps. Nothing in the image understands finality. The return is ours, not theirs. The animal on the rock continues feeding. The current continues moving. The snow continues falling. The abyss does not know the dive is ending. This may be one of its most calming truths. Human events begin and end sharply. Launch, dive, discovery, publication, debate, permit, vote, disaster, recovery. The abyss receives these as disturbances within longer processes. Not because human events are unimportant, but because they are brief. The deep can be harmed by brief events, yes. It can be altered by decisions made quickly. But it does not organize itself around our narrative arcs. When we leave, the world does not close like a book. It remains open in darkness. In the control room, after hours of watchfulness, fatigue changes the air. People speak more softly. The glow of monitors makes faces look underwater themselves. Someone rubs their eyes. Someone points at the screen, unsure whether a shape is an animal or shadow. The pilot answers with a small adjustment. The ROV rises. There is a strange sadness in ascent. Not because returning is bad. Returning is necessary. But every meter upward increases separation from the world just seen. The images continue, yet the vehicle is leaving the bottom. The place falls away from direct attention and becomes memory, data, coordinates, samples, files, at 3,000 meters. The abyssal floor is gone from view. At 2,000, darkness still surrounds. At 1,000, the first faint natural difference may exist somewhere above, too weak to matter yet. At hundreds of meters, the ocean begins remembering blue. Finally, light returns, not all at once. A paling of black, a cold suggestion. Then a depth where the water is no longer simply unlit, but faintly colored. Particles catch the returning day. The surface becomes a bright ceiling. The ROV rises toward it like a machine returning from the inside of the planet. When it breaks through, the world above seems almost vulgar with light. Sky, foam, deck, wind, voices uncompressed by water. The machine hangs from the crane, streaming, awkward, scarred perhaps by the dive, surrounded by people in hard hats and rain gear. The abyss has become an object swinging in air. The transition is too fast for the mind. Minutes ago, the camera was among animals that have no dawn. Now gulls may be visible. A phone may vibrate. Someone may ask about dinner. The human world reasserts itself with unreasonable confidence. It is bright, noisy, social, full of edges and weather and tasks. But those who have watched the descent may carry a new quiet. Not dramatic silence, something more internal. A recognition that the surface is thinner than it feels. The Black Ocean has not moved farther away because the vehicle returned. It is still below, beneath the same waves, continuing. The ship floats over it like a thought over a depth of sleep. Later, when the footage is reviewed, the abyss will be slowed, paused, annotated. Frames will be captured, species lists built, samples logged, reports written. Perhaps a new observation will be made. Perhaps the dive will be one small addition to a long baseline. Perhaps it will become part of an argument about protection. Perhaps it will sit in an archive until another person, years from now, leans closer. That leaning closer matters. It is one of the human gestures the deep can still improve. To lean closer without immediately taking. To look without assuming the look is enough. To be changed by a place that will never become comfortable. This may be the quiet ethic of below 4,000 meters. The title says Black Ocean, and black is accurate enough for the eye. But the longer the story stays down there, the more black becomes insufficient. The black contains gradients of pressure, food, sound, chemistry, memory. It contains living light. It contains traces of surface seasons. It contains human cables and plastic. It contains rocks from volcanic histories, sediments from ancient climates, animals with bodies shaped by cold and force, microbes altering the meaning of energy. Black is not a blank color here. It is a cover over complexity. Imagine again the first frame. 4001. The number changing. The beam holding a narrow room in the water. A pale fish arriving, leaving, the snow. The darkness beyond. At the beginning, the number felt like a threshold. Now it feels more like an address. Not exact, not complete, but enough to know that a world begins there which cannot be reduced to depth alone. Below 4,000 meters, the ocean becomes abyssal in the fullest sense. Immense, cold, dark, pressured, slow, alive, connected, vulnerable, and mostly unknown in the detailed ways that matter most. It is not a place for simple fear. Simple fear invents monsters and stops thinking. It is not a place for simple wonder. Simple wonder turns everything into beauty and forgets consequence. It is not a place for simple use. Simple use calls a habitat a deposit and calls uncertainty an obstacle. The abyss asks for something harder. Attention with endurance. Curiosity with manners. Power with restraint. Knowledge with doubt. These are not glamorous words, but glamour has always struggled below 4,000 meters. The abyss is not cinematic in the obvious way, unless we force it. Its drama is not always movement. Its suspense is not always danger. Its revelation is often quiet. A track, a small animal, a chemistry reading, a map sharpening, a theory failing, a community found where emptiness was expected. There is beauty in that kind of revelation. Not beauty as ornament, beauty as accuracy becoming felt. To feel the abyss accurately is to allow it to remain partly beyond us. To avoid making it friendly. To avoid making it only terrifying. To let its blackness be physical, not merely metaphorical. To let its life be real, without needing it to resemble life near us. To let its vulnerability count even when it cannot plead. The world below 4,000 meters does not need our mythology. It needs our better attention. And perhaps, sometimes, our absence. There is dignity in not entering everywhere at once. There is wisdom in leaving some places unscarred until knowledge catches up with reach. There is maturity in admitting that access is not entitlement, that technology is not permission, that seeing 10 meters clearly does not mean understanding a plane, that a map is not a moral license. Below 4,000 meters, humility is not an aesthetic. It is a safety requirement. For machines, because pressure punishes arrogance. For science, because evidence punishes assumption. For policy, because ecosystems punish oversimplification, though often too late for easy correction. For culture, because a species that cannot respect hidden life will eventually misunderstand visible life too. The abyss is one of Earth's great teachers of proportion. It shows how small a human body is, how powerful human systems have become, how thin the surface is, how much of the planet continues without our notice. Proportion can be frightening. It can also be peaceful. To be small is not to be useless. It is to stop pretending size is the source of meaning. The small researcher watching a screen can still ask a careful question. The small instrument can still gather a crucial record. The small protected area, if well placed, can still matter. The small change in public imagination can become a larger change in policy. The small decision not to disturb can leave a slow-growing life in place. In the abyss, small things matter constantly. Particles, microbes, larvae, chemical gradients, sediment grains, the slight turn of a current, the difference between a nodule present and a nodule removed, the faint glow of an animal communicating in the dark. The abyss is vast, but it is made of small dependencies. That should make human smallness feel less like defeat. It should make it feel like kinship. Night falls on the ship. This is surface night, thin by comparison, full of air and stars and instruments and the red glow of deck lights. The sea around the hull is black now too, but differently. Waves catch small reflections. The horizon disappears. The vessel's engines pulse. Somewhere in the control room, footage from the dive plays again. The black water on the screen is not the same as the black water outside. One is night on top. One is night underneath. One will end with morning. The other will not. A person steps onto deck after reviewing the footage. The wind is cold. The ship moves gently. Above, if the clouds have opened, stars appear in the sky. They seem far, bright, clean. For a moment, the old upward awe returns. It should. The sky deserves it. But beneath the person's boots, beneath the hull, beneath the waves reflecting scattered starlight, another darkness holds. Not distant, not overhead, not empty between points of light. A dense black world of water and life and pressure, continuing without sky. The person looks down, though there is nothing to see. That looking down is different now. It is no longer the glance of someone checking water. It is the gesture of someone remembering depth. The surface does not reveal what it covers. That is not deception. It is physics. Water reflects before it opens. Light scatters. Depth hides in plain sight. A wave can glitter above a plain no one has mapped in detail. A calm patch of sea can rest over a trench. A storm can pass over a vent field. A shipping lane can cross animal communities that no passenger will imagine. The ocean's face is not false. It is incomplete. So is every face. Perhaps that is why the sea has always drawn human feeling. It shows enough to invite love and hides enough to resist possession. It is familiar at the edge and unknowable in volume. It lets us stand near it, but not inside its full reality. It offers sound, smell, motion, reflection, danger, food, memory. Then, below all that, it keeps the Black Country. Below 4,000 meters, that country has no need to become visible to be real. Its reality is pressure against rock, cold around bodies, particles falling, currents moving, microbes feeding, animals waiting, signals flashing and fading. The abyss is not silent about itself. We are simply not fluent. Fluency will take time, and even then it will remain partial. The goal cannot be total translation. No species fully translates another. No instrument fully translates a world. The goal is better relationship, better questions, better limits, better care, and perhaps a better kind of darkness in the human mind. Not darkness as ignorance defended, darkness as respect for what exceeds the beam. Darkness as a reminder that the unseen is not unreal. Darkness as habitat, not failure. Darkness as a reason to slow the hand. The sea below 4,000 meters will remain black. Even if mapped, even if studied, even if named more fully, its darkness is not a temporary lack waiting for our correction. It is part of the physics of the ocean, part of the lives that evolved there, part of the planet's structure. To protect it is not to keep ourselves from knowing, it is to learn without making knowledge another word for possession. Before the recording ends, there is another way to enter the Black Ocean. Not through the camera, through history. For most of human time, the deep was not a place. It was a limit. Sailors crossed it without knowing its shape. Empires moved over it. Ships carried spices, weapons, prisoners, letters, fever, silk, grain, grief, and ambition across basins whose floors were less known than the faces of the moon would later become. A line dropped from a vessel might find depth near shore. Beyond that, the sea was too deep for ordinary sounding, too wide for imagination, too indifferent to the rope. The surface became history. The bottom remained rumor. Old charts often filled unknown seas with dangers, monsters, decorative winds, warnings, coastlines sharpened by trade and fear. But the real hidden thing was not the serpent drawn near the edge. It was the landscape below the keel, mountains drowned in black water, trenches like open seams, plains wider than kingdoms, vents no one imagined, animal migrations happening vertically beneath moonlit waves. The Black Ocean was not empty during those crossings. It was merely unconsulted. When early oceanographers began measuring depth more systematically, the result was not just better navigation. It was a psychological rupture. The ocean acquired a floor, not a mythical bottom, but a measured one. Sounding lines, dredges, later echo sounders, later sonar, later satellites and multi-beam mapping, each method replaced blankness with form. But form arrived unevenly. A depth number did not reveal a habitat. A dredge sample did not reveal behavior. A map did not reveal the hour-by-hour life of a sediment plain. Every technology opened one sense and left another dark. This is the pattern again and again. The deep gives knowledge by categories, not all at once. Depth before image. Image before ecology. Ecology before long-term change. Long-term change before wisdom, if wisdom comes at all. A sounding line could tell a sailor that water was deep, but not that small animals were migrating above the abyss at night. A dredge could bring up animals mangled by a scent, proving life existed while distorting the lives themselves. A trawl could collect bodies, but erase arrangement. A camera could reveal behavior, but only within light. A sonar map could show topography, but not the softness of a sea cucumber's track. Every method has a shadow. Good science learns the shadow of its own tools. The abyss has often been misread because our first tools were too rough for its delicacy. Imagine trying to understand a city by dragging a net through it in darkness and studying what tears loose. You might learn that something lives there. You might collect fragments of architecture, clothing, food, bones. You might begin a catalog, but you would not know the rhythm of kitchens, the routes people take home, the quiet rooms, the reasons windows are lit. Early deep-sea sampling was necessary, brave, and crude. It answered one old error and created new questions. Life existed at depth. But how did it live? In what densities? In what relationships? How did it move? How did it feed? What changed with seasons far above? What role did microbes play? How did pressure shape chemistry? How did a plane that looked monotonous differ from another plane thousands of kilometers away? The Black Ocean did not become simple when it became reachable. Reachability only made its complexity harder to ignore. There is a photograph, a kind of scene, that belongs to the history of descent, a pressure sphere, a small human compartment made round, because pressure respects curves more than corners. The idea is almost childlike in its clarity. If water presses from every direction, make a shape that shares the force. Remove the weak angles. let the outside push evenly. Inside such a sphere, a human being becomes both explorer and contents. The window is small, the air is limited. The instruments are close, the world outside is black, until lights reveal some part of it. The body sits in a space that exists only because engineering has negotiated temporary permission. Deep submergence is not spacious, it is intimate with danger. A human does not stroll into the abyss. A human is enclosed, carried, lowered, sealed away from the water by calculations and material strength. Every successful dive is a collaboration with physics, not a victory over it. This is why the great descents carry such emotional force, not because the people became rulers of the bottom, but because they entered conditions that make the human body absurd. At extreme depth, survival is borrowed. Borrowed from steel, borrowed from titanium, borrowed from design, borrowed from trust in unseen welds and seals and calculations. The bathyscaphe Trieste's descent to the deepest measured part of the sea in 1960 belongs to that lineage of borrowed survival. A strange craft, elegant in principle and ungainly in appearance, lowered two men into a place where pressure was not an idea, but the main fact. The journey took hours. The bottom visit was brief. The ocean remained afterward exactly itself. Decades passed before another person returned to that depth. That gap says something important about human priorities and about difficulty. It was not that the trench moved farther away. It was not that curiosity vanished. The problem was that going there remained technically severe, expensive, risky, and scientifically complicated. Distance alone does not define remoteness. Difficulty does. A star can be watched from a field through a telescope. A trench directly below a ship remains unseen without a descent system capable of surviving an entire ocean. This is the paradox of the deep. It is geographically near and operationally extreme. The nearest abyssal plane is not beyond orbit. It is not past another planet. It is not waiting after years of travel through vacuum. It is underwater. But water is a wall made of weight, opacity, corrosion, cold, and poor communication. A wall that moves. A wall that eats light. A wall that breaks weak machines without drama. Every descent is an argument that the wall can be crossed for a while, not removed. Crossed, modern vehicles have changed the scale of our looking. Remotely operated vehicles can stay longer, bring stronger lights, carry tools, stream images to teams on ships and sometimes to audiences on land. Autonomous vehicles can survey without constant human steering, mapping swaths of seafloor, measuring water, following programmed paths in darkness. Landers can wait, listening and recording. Floats and gliders can travel through water masses. Sensors can remain where humans cannot. The deep is becoming instrumented. But instrumented is not the same as known. A city can be full of cameras and still misunderstood. A forest can be measured and still poorly loved. A body can be scanned and still not healed. Data are a beginning. Interpretation is work. Wisdom is rarer. Below 4,000 meters, the quantity of data is growing. The quality of attention must grow with it. Otherwise, the abyss becomes another place where information expands faster than care. Think of a single autonomous vehicle moving over an abyssal plain. No pilot watches every second. The vehicle follows a route set before descent. It carries sonar, cameras, perhaps chemical sensors. Its lights may pulse or remain off depending on mission. It does not feel loneliness. It does not know the animal passing beneath. It stores the world as measurements. There is grace in this too. A machine moving patiently through black water, not heroic, not afraid, making a line of knowledge across a place where no human eye could remain. It may map ripples, detect a slope, trace a plume, photograph animals, return with terabytes of seafloor that will later become hours of human attention. But autonomy also changes the ethics of looking. When instruments can gather more than people can examine immediately, the deep can become backlog. A hidden world transformed into stored files waiting for labor. Discovery delayed not by access, but by analysis. A species may already be recorded and still unnamed. A habitat may already be photographed and still unrecognized. A change may already be measurable and still unnoticed. The abyss enters databases before it enters understanding. This is not failure. It is a new stage of exploration. The age of the single heroic observation gives way to the age of overwhelming evidence. Cameras record continuously. Sensors produce streams. Models assimilate. Archives grow. The deep becomes not only physically dark, but computationally deep, too much to see by hand, too complex for one mind, requiring collaboration between oceanographers, biologists, geologists, chemists, engineers, statisticians, taxonomists, computer scientists, policymakers, and people who know how to ask whether the machine has mistaken snow for animals. Even artificial intelligence may assist, sorting footage, detecting organisms, flagging anomalies. But the irony is sharp. We may use machines to help us see the living world our own machines risk damaging. The tool is not moral by itself. It depends on the purposes it serves. The abyss will be classified faster. The question is whether it will be protected faster too. Classification without protection can become a map for extraction. Protection without understanding can miss what matters. The deep requires both, and neither comes easily. The Black Ocean asks us to become more intelligent than our appetite. That may be one of the defining challenges of the century. A century ago, the abyss was still surrounded by scientific uncertainty so large that imagination had room to make it barren or monstrous. Today, the uncertainty remains large, but it has changed shape. We know the deep is alive. We know it is diverse. We know it participates in planetary systems. We know it is affected by human activity. We know it contains materials some industries want. We know governance is incomplete. We know the timeline of commercial interest is shorter than the timeline of ecological understanding. This is knowledge enough to create responsibility and uncertainty enough to make responsibility difficult. There is no innocence in that space. Only choices. In the Central Pacific, the Clarion-Clipperton Zone has become a name that carries more than geography. It describes an enormous region of abyssal seafloor where polymetallic nodules lie across sediment plains containing metals such as manganese, nickel, cobalt, and copper. The nodules are attractive to industries thinking about batteries, electronics, infrastructure, and strategic supply chains. From a surface economy, they can look like opportunities scattered on the floor. From an abyssal ecology, they are part of a habitat. This difference is not sentimental. It is literal. Animals live on, around, among, and in relation to these fields. Some require hard substrate. Some use the sediment between. Microbial processes occur. The plain is not empty storage. It is a living seafloor with structures made slowly over immense time. The machines imagined for collecting nodules are not gentle by the standards of the deep. They would move across sediment, remove nodules, create plumes, generate noise and light, alter surfaces, and leave tracks over areas far beyond any single camera frame. Engineers can improve designs. Regulators can set conditions. Scientists can model plumes and monitor impacts. But the basic act remains large. A slow habitat meets industrial tempo. The argument for deep-sea mining often invokes the surface world's needs. Energy transition. Critical minerals. Reduced reliance on land-based mining with its own severe harms. Supply security. Technological demand. These are not imaginary concerns. Land mining can devastate communities and ecosystems. Clean energy technologies require materials. The world's appetite for metals is real. The argument against rushing into the abyss invokes a different reality. Unknown biodiversity. Slow recovery. Irreplaceable habitats. Weak, baselines. Governance gaps. The possibility that solving one environmental problem by opening another frontier may repeat an old pattern, moving harm to a place with less political visibility. Both sides speak from real pressures. That is why the issue is not easy. If it were easy, it would not reveal us. The abyss becomes a test of whether a civilization can pursue necessary transitions without treating hidden ecosystems as collateral, because they are hard to picture. It asks whether green technology can be built with dark sacrifice unnoticed beneath it. It asks whether the word sustainable can stretch downward honestly. A battery has a shadow, so does a phone. So does a wind turbine, a military system, a data center, an electric car, a satellite network, a hospital machine, a city's appetite for copper. The question is not whether modern life should abandon materials. It cannot. The question is whether material demand will be met with a mature accounting of all landscapes involved, including those too deep for ordinary mourning. The Black Ocean is entering supply chain language. It must also enter ethical language. If not, the abyss will appear in spreadsheets before it appears in public conscience. And spreadsheets are poor habitats for slow animals. Governance of the deep seabed beyond national jurisdiction involves international institutions, negotiations, draft rules, scientific advice, national interests, corporate pressure, environmental advocacy, legal disputes, and the strange difficulty of making decisions for a place almost no decision-maker will ever see. The word common appears often in such conversations. Common heritage, common concern, common responsibility. But common can become vague if not attached to care. If something belongs to everyone, it can sometimes be treated as belonging to no one in particular. The abyss needs the opposite, shared responsibility made specific enough to matter. Specific to habitats, specific to baselines, specific to monitoring, specific to thresholds, specific to no-go areas, specific to liability, specific to long-term stewardship beyond the lifetime of a contract. A permit is short. The abyss is long. Law struggles with duration. It can set terms, renew licenses, create institutions, assign obligations. But the deep sea operates on timescales that make human legal cycles seem like surface ripples. A nodule removed in a day may not return in millions of years. A community altered before full description may never enter law except as an absence no one can prove clearly enough. A monitoring period of decades may be short compared with recovery. This is not an argument against law. It is an argument for law that knows its own brevity. Law with memory built in. Law that does not confuse permission with wisdom. Law that treats absence of evidence as a warning when evidence is hard to gather. Law that can say no, not because no is simple, but because yes is premature. Below 4,000 meters, a premature yes can become a geological fact. The deep does not appeal. It records. A track in sediment. A missing nodule. A plume deposit. A changed community. A quieter or louder soundscape. A dataset with too few years before disturbance. These are records, not arguments. The arguments happen above, in rooms with translation headsets, policy documents, legal interpretations, shareholder reports, scientific briefings, and public campaigns. The abyss is present only through representation. This makes representation sacred in a practical sense. If a scientist describes uncertainty honestly, that matters. If a company minimizes uncertainty, that matters. If a government treats the deep as a strategic inventory, that matters. If a documentary turns the abyss into only terror, that matters. If a story teaches care for subtle life, that matters too. Representation becomes a kind of proxy habitat for public attention. What people can imagine, they may be capable of protecting. What they cannot imagine, someone else may define for them. Yet the deep should not be reduced to policy. It remains physically itself. Somewhere below 4,000 meters, away from mining debates, away from cameras, an animal crosses mud with no role in human controversy. It is not an example. It is alive. That simple fact must remain at the center, otherwise even protection can become abstract. The point is not to preserve an idea called biodiversity. The point is to preserve living relationships, actual bodies, places where processes continue. A sea cucumber feeding across abyssal sediment may not be beautiful to everyone. But beauty is a poor gatekeeper for existence. Many living things do not enter human affection easily. Some are translucent, small, slow, worm-like, microbial, chemically strange, or invisible without equipment. The deep ocean is filled with life that cannot win popularity contests. Conservation built only on charisma will fail it. The abyss asks for a more principled care. Care because life is there. Care because systems matter. Care because ignorance is not license. Care because the planet is more than its photogenic parts. This matters beyond the ocean. A culture trained to protect only what it finds cute, scenic, profitable, or spiritually flattering will eventually damage much of the world. Wetlands, insects, fungi, microbes, deep sediments, cold corals, abyssal plains, nocturnal animals, uncharismatic fish, old-growth soil, places with no postcard angle. The abyss is the far end of this problem. It forces the question in its starkest form. Can we care about a dark, cold, remote, mostly unseen ecosystem without turning it into a mascot or a mine? That question is not only environmental, it is civilizational, because the ability to care for what does not flatter us is close to the ability to be wise. The Black Ocean is not flattering. It does not make humans seem central. It does not reward speed. It does not promise easy access. It does not arrange its creatures for our affection. It does not turn its darkness into a lesson unless we do the work of listening. Perhaps that is why it is valuable as a teacher. It cannot be easily recruited into our vanity. There is another scientific frontier down there, quieter than vents and less dramatic than trenches: microbial life in sediments. Within the seafloor, below the visible surface of mud, microbial communities persist in conditions of low energy and slow metabolism. Some live on chemical reactions in sediment. Some transform carbon, nitrogen, sulfur, metals. Their timescales can be astonishingly slow. They may divide rarely. They may endure where food is scarce and pressure immense, participating in cycles that shape the chemistry of the ocean and Earth. To the camera, this world is invisible. A smooth patch of sediment may be dense with microbial processes. The living activity may not announce itself with motion. It may not glow. It may not produce a face, a limb, a body the human eye can sympathize with. Yet, it can matter profoundly. The abyss is filled with invisible labor. Surface cultures often undervalue invisible labor. The analogy is not perfect, but it is suggestive. We notice the obvious bodies and miss the processes that support conditions. Microbes make a mockery of our attention hierarchy. They are small, often unseen, and indispensable. Below 4,000 meters, microbes connect death to chemistry, chemistry to food webs, sediments to global cycles. They live on particles as they sink, in animal guts, on bones, around vents, in cold seeps, inside sediment pores, on rocks, within biofilms. They alter the meaning of the dark because they prove again that life is not always shaped like an animal in a beam. The Black Ocean's largest mysteries may not have eyes. They may not move at a speed the camera can feel. They may not become famous, but they may control transformations without which the larger system cannot be understood. This is a humbling inversion. The abyss is vast, and its basic work may depend on lives nearly invisible. Again, scale folds. The enormous rests partly on the minute. A flake of marine snow is also a microbial city. As it falls, bacteria colonize it, consume it, change it, make it lighter or denser, alter how much carbon reaches the deep, and how much returns to dissolved form before arriving. What looks like a particle is a process in motion. A tiny falling object can be food, habitat, chemistry, and climate pathway at once. The camera shows the flake as white motion against black. The science shows the flake as a world. The imagination has to learn from both. Abyssal darkness is therefore not only a visual condition, it is epistemic. Much of what matters cannot be seen in ordinary footage. The beam gives animals and particles. Instruments give chemistry. Sequencing gives genes. Cores give time. Models give patterns. Listening gives sound. No single mode is enough. The deep must be approached as a chorus of partial senses. That is difficult for a culture dominated by images. We trust what we can see. The abyss keeps saying, sight is only one door, and not always the main one. Cold seeps offer another door. In places where methane, sulfide, or other reduced chemicals seep from the seafloor, communities can form around chemical energy without the heat and drama of black smokers. The scene may look quieter than a vent, less cinematic, but the principle is equally strange to surface assumptions. Chemistry leaks. Microbes respond. Animals gather. Carbonates form. Clams, mussels, tube worms, bacterial mats, different communities depending on the chemistry and setting. The seafloor is not always sealed. It breathes chemically in places. The Black Ocean notices. A cold seep below or near abyssal depths can sustain life in patterns that do not depend only on falling food from above. It reminds us that the deep is fed from more than one direction. From the surface, particles descend. From the earth, chemicals emerge. From currents, oxygen and suspended food arrive. From carcasses, sudden abundance appears. From microbes, transformations continue. The abyss does not run on one exchange. It works through overlapping economies, each with its own currency. Sunlight spent into particles. Chemistry rising from rock. Sound moving through water. Surfaces offered by nodules, bones, corals, wrecks. Time itself acting as value. Such systems complicate the old vertical story. It is true that much deep life depends on what falls from above, but some communities are partly independent, drawing energy from geological sources. Others are episodic, blooming around a fallen whale or wood. Others depend on current-swept hard ground. The deep is not one hunger. It is many hungers, many strategies, many arrangements of scarcity and opportunity. This is why the phrase below 4,000 meters should never become a single image. Below 4,000 meters may mean a plain of nodules, a trench wall, a seamount slope, a hydrothermal field, a cold seep, a whale fall, a cable route, a fracture zone, a sediment basin, a place warmed subtly by deep circulation changes, a place never visited by a camera. The title gathers them under blackness, but the blackness is full of difference. Care begins when difference is allowed back in. The ocean hides variety under one color. We have to put the variety back. A deep plain under the Pacific is not the same as a deep plain under the Atlantic. A trench in the Western Pacific is not the same as a slope in the Southern Ocean. Food supply differs. Oxygen differs. Temperature differs. Sedimentation differs. Geological history differs. Species differ. Human pressures differ. Even darkness has local character because what lives in it and passes through it changes. The abyss is global, but not generic. That sentence should guide every story about it. Fear belongs in the story too, not theatrical fear, Not the fear of invented monsters, but bodily fear. Many people feel a deep unease when imagining open water below them. The response is often mocked as irrational, but it may be more intelligent than mockery allows. A body floating above darkness understands, before language. That support has become conditional. The ground is gone. The water is opaque. The distance below cannot be crossed by effort. The surface is the only border between air and another set of rules. At 4,000 meters, those rules are absolute. Fear recognizes dependence. The swimmer depends on buoyancy. The ship depends on hull integrity. The submersible depends on seals. The ROV depends on tether, power, pilot, weather, recovery. The researcher depends on data that may fail. The policymaker depends on maps that may be incomplete. The public depends on witnesses. The whole relationship is built on dependencies, often hidden by the smoothness of the surface. Accurate fear can be useful. It can prevent arrogance. It can respect physics. It can keep engineers awake during checks. It can remind scientists to design less disruptive methods. It can restrain companies from treating the abyss as an empty warehouse. It can keep a society from imagining that every reachable place must be used. Inaccurate fear is different. It fills the dark with fantasies and ignores real stakes. It worries about monsters while missing microbes, currents, corals, nodules, plumes, carbon, noise, and law. It turns the deep into horror and thereby makes care seem optional, because horror is something we survive or avoid, not something we relate to responsibly. The Black Ocean deserves accurate fear. Fear with detail. Fear that knows pressure values and recovery times. Fear that sees fragile habitats. Fear that understands human power. Fear that can coexist with tenderness. Tenderness may seem like the wrong word below 4,000 meters. But it is not. There is tenderness in watching a delicate animal move through impossible pressure. Tenderness in a scientist lowering lights so a creature is less disturbed. Tenderness in leaving a sample because the habitat is rare. Tenderness in naming a new species carefully. Tenderness in protecting a place most people will never visit. Tenderness does not make the abyss soft. It makes our approach less brutal. Human stories above the abyss are also part of its shadow. There are crossings that carry pride, voyages of exploration, trade routes, scientific expeditions, migrations that saved lives, journeys of return. There are crossings that carry horror, slave ships, warships, vessels lost in storms, refugees in fragile boats, sailors who disappeared, aircraft and wreckage resting on seafloors, families left with coordinates instead of graves. The deep ocean has received human bodies and objects for centuries. It is not a museum in the ordinary sense. It does not arrange memory for us, but it holds remains, sometimes preserving, sometimes scattering, sometimes burying. Below 4,000 meters, human history can become quiet matter among non-human processes. This is not the main story of the abyss, but it is part of the human relationship with it. The deep is not only a scientific frontier, it is also a place where absence becomes geographical. A missing ship may rest in black water. A lost aircraft may become a search area on a map. A family may imagine depth not as wonder, but as the space between them and answers. The abyss can be beautiful and unbearable at the same time. To speak of it only as mystery risks forgetting grief. To speak of it only as grief risks forgetting life. The truth contains both. A wreck can become habitat without ceasing to be wreck. A seafloor can hold human sorrow and still be part of an animal's ordinary path. The ocean does not separate meanings the way we do. It layers them. This layering is difficult, but necessary. The Black Ocean is not pure wilderness untouched by human emotion, nor is it merely the backdrop for human tragedy. It is a living planetary realm that sometimes receives human history into itself. A plate on a wreck. a shoe half buried, a corroding hull, a fish passing through a doorway built for air. These images disturb because they show how quickly human intention can become material and how calmly the deep can continue around it. Calm continuation is not cruelty. It is the ocean's scale. A storm that sinks a ship may be violent, but the abyss below receives the result without narrative. The receiving is not mercy or indifference in human terms. It is process. Descent, impact, corrosion, colonization, burial, alteration. The deep works on what arrives. This can help explain why the abyss feels philosophical without ever trying to be. It places human meaning inside physical process. It does not erase meaning, but it does not let meaning stop matter from changing. Everything becomes part of something else. A whale, a plankton bloom, a ship, a particle of soot, a plastic fragment, a volcanic ash layer, a fallen tree carried out by a river and sunk. The abyss receives them differently, but receives them. Gravity is one of the ocean's storytellers. It keeps bringing the surface down. The Black Ocean is therefore not below in the sense of being separate from above. It is below in the sense of being the place where above eventually arrives. This makes the abyss intimate with death, but not morbid. It is a place where endings become inputs, where bodies become food, where particles become sediment, where loss enters cycles too slow for sentiment, but not meaningless. A surface culture often hides death, speeds past decay, sanitizes endings. The deep sea is less embarrassed. It turns the dead into ecology with patient honesty. This honesty can feel severe. It can also feel strangely peaceful. Not comforting in the easy way. Peaceful because it shows continuity without pretending nothing is lost. A whale fall illustrates this better than almost anything. The animal's body descends through layers it once moved through alive. The same water that held its song now carries its weight. When it reaches the bottom, the abyss changes around it. Scavengers arrive. Flesh vanishes. Bones remain. Microbial processes alter chemistry. Specialized organisms may appear. Communities succeed one another over time. Eventually, the whale becomes less recognizable. Then part of sediment, chemistry, history, the body becomes a long event. Most surface events are short. A death is marked on a date. A funeral happens. A season of grief follows. The abyss makes an event ecological and prolonged. It refuses the clean ending. This is not metaphor. It is food web. Yet it becomes metaphor because humans cannot help finding ourselves in physical truth. The whale fall says that descent is not only loss, it is transformation under pressure. But the abyss does not promise redemption. Not everything becomes useful in a comforting way. Plastic does not become nourishment simply because it sinks. Persistent chemicals do not become harmless because depth makes them invisible. A mining scar does not become acceptable because sediment eventually softens its edges. Transformation is not absolution. The deep can absorb, but absorption is not forgiveness. This distinction matters. For centuries, the ocean's capacity to receive was mistaken for capacity to erase. Waste dumped, chemicals released, carbon emitted, noise added. The sea seemed large enough to dilute consequence beyond concern, but dilution is not disappearance. Distance is not moral cleansing. Depth is not a landfill with better poetry. Below 4,000 meters, the evidence of this mistake can arrive slowly and remain long. The abyss teaches that out of sight is often a delay, not an ending. A contaminant may enter tissue. A plastic item may settle. A warming signal may propagate downward. A sound may travel. A disturbed sediment layer may persist. A removed structure may not regrow. The consequence continues in forms that may not produce an immediate surface alarm. Human systems like alarms. The deep gives signals. Signals require listening. The difference between an alarm and a signal is one reason hidden environments are so vulnerable. Alarms force attention. Signals invite it. If attention is busy elsewhere, signals can be missed until they become damage. The abyss is full of signals. We are still learning how to hear them. There is one more return to the pressure itself. At 4,000 meters, pressure is often described in numbers, hundreds of atmospheres, thousands of pounds per square inch. The number matters. It helps engineers. It helps students. It helps the mind mark danger. But pressure is also a sculptor of possibility. It changes gases. It challenges proteins. It affects membranes. It alters how organisms function. It shapes vehicle design, sampling methods, experiments, and the difficulty of keeping deep life alive at the surface. It turns ordinary materials into liabilities. It makes empty spaces dangerous. It rewards compactness and strength. It punishes trapped air. It makes the phrase sealed environment more than a convenience. A plastic bottle taken to depth and returned crushed is a classroom demonstration. A pressure housing imploding is an engineering lesson no one wants repeated. A deep animal surviving only under pressure is a biological truth easy to violate by collecting carelessly. Pressure is not just background. It is the abyss touching everything. For creatures down there, pressure is not an enemy. This is important. We call it crushing because it would crush us. But the animal does not wake each day under oppression. It is built in relation to that force. Its internal chemistry, body composition, and absence of gas-filled spaces make the pressure livable. The abyssal body is not resisting pressure as a submarine resists pressure. It is participating in a pressure-balanced existence. This is another reason our metaphors can fail. A submersible is a sealed room fighting the ocean. A deep-sea animal is not a room. It is water, tissue, chemistry, adaptation. The animal's survival is not a miniature version of our engineering. It is a different solution entirely. Engineering keeps the deep out. Biology lets the deep in, but on terms life can use. That difference is beautiful. It is also humbling. We build walls. They build compatibility. Or rather, evolution builds compatibility slowly through countless lives, failures, inheritances, and chance. No animal chooses it. No species plans it. The abyssal body is history made flesh, a record of pressures survived over time. When a camera catches such a body for a second, it is seeing more than an individual. It is seeing a lineage of solutions. A quiet engineering without engineers. The last hours of the expedition bring weather. Wind rises. The ship changes motion. Work becomes harder. The ocean surface reminds everyone that the deep is not the only danger. A storm can stop a dive before pressure ever gets a chance. Surface weather controls access to the world without weather. This is another strange hierarchy. The bright, turbulent upper sea governs the schedule of exploration into the stable dark. The abyss may be calm, but reaching it is not. A swell can make recovery unsafe. A storm can delay deployment. A cable can be stressed. People can be injured on deck. The deep is hidden under a surface that is itself alive with force. To study the most constant darkness, one must first pass through changing weather. This makes field science humble in another way. Plans meet sea state. Schedules meet wind. Ambition meets the captain's judgment. Sometimes the wisest descent is the one postponed. Postponement feels like failure in a culture of momentum. At sea, it can be intelligence. The ocean teaches limits at multiple levels. Pressure below, weather above, equipment in between, human fatigue everywhere. Ignoring limits is not courage. Courage can include waiting. This is a lesson the abyss shares with many difficult places: mountains, polar ice, deserts, caves, spaceflight, surgery, grief. There are conditions under which pushing forward becomes stupidity dressed as bravery. The deep has no patience for that costume. It will not reward performance. It will simply respond. The storm passes eventually, or it does not, and the ship goes home. Either way, the abyss remains. That remaining can be frustrating, but also reassuring. Human access fails, the world continues. A dive is lost, the habitat persists. A question waits for another season. The Black Ocean is not destroyed by our inability to see it today. But this reassurance has a limit. The abyss can continue and still be changed. It can remain dark and still be damaged. It can outlast our visit and still carry our marks. Endurance is not invulnerability. That distinction returns again and again because it may be the one we most need. As the ship heads back toward port, samples are stored, backups made, preliminary notes exchanged. The ocean outside may be rough or calm. The crew falls into transit rhythms. Scientific intensity gives way to processing, cleaning, packing, tired jokes, quiet reflection. A port will appear. Land will return with its smell of soil, fuel, pavement, vegetation, food. The body will feel stable ground and perhaps feel strange for a day. Emails will flood in. The abyss will become work to be done on land, analysis, reports, papers, meetings, presentations, policy comments, grant proposals, outreach, arguments over interpretation. The Black Ocean follows people home as obligation. Not everyone who studies it speaks poetically about it. Some may prefer methods, data, caution, exact terms. That is good. The abyss needs precision more than romance. But even precision can carry feeling. A measured depth can be a kind of respect. A correct species identification can be a small act of justice. A careful uncertainty statement can protect a habitat from overconfident harm. Emotion is not the enemy of science. Undisciplined emotion is. The best attention below 4,000 meters may be both moved and meticulous. Moved enough to care. Meticulous enough not to invent. Moved enough to resist exploitation. Meticulous enough to recognize trade-offs. Moved enough to communicate. Meticulous enough to remain honest when the story becomes complicated. The abyss deserves that combination because it is too easily reduced by either side alone. Pure emotion may turn it into a mystical darkness without actionable knowledge. Pure extraction of data may drain it of moral force. Together, feeling and rigor can create a better witness. Witness is the right word, perhaps. Not owner. Not conqueror. Witness. A witness sees and becomes responsible for the truth of what has been seen. A witness can speak when the seen cannot speak in human rooms. A witness can be challenged, corrected, required to be accurate. The abyss needs witnesses who accept correction. The Black Ocean is not voiceless. It simply does not speak in our institutions. So we carry fragments upward. Images, samples, maps, sounds, measurements, a pale fish in a beam, a nodule with life attached, a coral broken by gear, a plume test, a sediment core, a temperature record, a hydrophone trace, a list of species known and unknown. These fragments become the vocabulary through which the abyss enters the surface world. What we do with that vocabulary will matter. The public often meets the deep through extremes, the deepest point, the strangest animal, the brightest bioluminescent display, the most terrifying teeth, the oldest organism, the largest pressure. Extremes are gateways. They attract attention because the mind responds to edges. But if a person stays only at the edge, the middle disappears. The daily life of the abyss is not always extreme in spectacle. It is continuous, subdued, functional, difficult, often visually sparse. a mature story must move from the extreme into the ordinary. The ordinary abyssal scene is not lesser. It may be more important. Most of the deep is not a record-breaking trench or a dramatic vent. Much of it is plain. Slope, sediment, darkness, current, animals feeding and waiting, microbes working, particles falling. To care only about extremes is to miss the living majority. This is true on land as well. Most life is not apex predator or natural wonder. It is soil, root, insect, fungus, plankton, grass, small bird, ordinary fish, microbial film. The world is held together by the unglamorous. The abyss makes that truth stark, because the glamorous is so rare in the beam, and the unglamorous is so vast. If storytelling can make the ordinary abyss felt, it has done something worthwhile. Not by exaggerating it, by slowing down enough for it to appear. A flat plain with tracks. A small animal feeding. A faint current. A particle storm of former sunlight. A nodule serving as the only hard place in meters of mud. A camera seeing little and, because it sees little, teaching us how limited the camera is. The ordinary is not empty. It is where most of existence happens. This may be the final correction the abyss offers before the footage ends. The deep is not meaningful only when it astonishes us. It is meaningful when it continues. One final connection waits beneath the quiet. The abyss, which seems so separate from human weather, helps make weather thinkable at all. The ocean stores heat with a capacity that land and air cannot match. It moves that heat through currents, buries some of it in deeper layers, returns some of it over time, and carries the memory of climate in water that can travel for years, decades, even centuries. The deep sea is not the atmosphere, but the atmosphere is not independent of it. The bright sky above the ship is linked to black water below by exchanges of heat, carbon, oxygen, salt, density, and motion. This connection is not easy to film. A camera cannot point at climate memory and hold it in a beam. It cannot show, in one image, deep water warming across a basin by a fraction that matters because the basin is immense. It cannot show how the sinking of cold, dense waters helps drive circulation, or how changes in polar regions can echo through the dark. It cannot show dissolved carbon moving through chemical pathways, or oxygen minimum zones shifting, or the slow consequences of a planet taking in excess heat. The abyss is part of the climate system in ways too large for spectacle. That makes it easy to forget. Surface change is easier to dramatize. A hurricane has an eye. A flood has streets. A wildfire has flames. A bleached reef has a before and after painful enough for the eye. Deep ocean change often arrives as numbers, trends, anomalies, profiles, maps with gradients. It asks the public to care about invisible movement through water that no one can stand inside. Yet invisibility does not reduce force. A deep current can carry consequences quietly. A temperature anomaly below 4,000 meters may not disturb a beachgoer's afternoon, but across a huge volume, it represents energy, expansion, habitat change, and a shifting planetary balance. The abyss may be slow to change compared with the atmosphere, but slow systems can be powerful precisely because they store change. A bank account grows quietly until the number becomes decisive. A glacier thins until collapse accelerates. A deep basin warms until the signal is no longer dismissible. The Black Ocean is full of slow accounts. We are still learning how to read the balance. The danger is that by the time slow things become obvious, they are no longer small. This is why long-term observation matters so much. A single temperature reading is a fact. A time series is a memory. A network of time series becomes the beginning of awareness. In the deep ocean, awareness requires continuity because the processes themselves move through time slowly. If instruments are removed, funding lapses, stations are abandoned, or data are not shared. The abyss returns to a silence that is partly ours, not because nothing happens, because we stopped listening. A civilization serious about climate cannot treat the deep as background. It has to watch the dark water, measure it, and allow its measurements to complicate surface urgency. Not to delay action. To make action truer. The abyss is not a separate environmental issue placed after the visible ones. It is connected to the visible ones from underneath. Carbon is one of the great connections. At the surface, microscopic photosynthetic organisms take up carbon dioxide and use sunlight to build living matter. Some of that matter is eaten, respired, recycled. Some sinks. Some becomes marine snow. Some reaches deeper water. Some is buried in sediment. Some returns through circulation and microbial respiration. The pathways are many, and the details matter, but the broad image is profound. Life in the light can move carbon into the dark. The abyss is not a storage locker with a simple door. It is an active participant in the long cycling of carbon. Particles are consumed on the way down. Bacteria transform them. Animals feed on them. Sediments bury or release. Currents redistribute. Chemistry shifts. The biological pump is not a machine in the industrial sense, but the metaphor helps for a moment. It moves matter from atmosphere-connected surface waters toward depth, not perfectly, not uniformly, but significantly enough that the deep sea becomes part of the planet's breathing. To disturb deep ecosystems without understanding them is therefore not only a biodiversity issue. It may also intersect with carbon pathways, sediment processes, and the ocean's capacity to hold or transform matter over time. The uncertainties are large, and that is precisely the point. Large uncertainty in a large system should produce caution, not casual confidence. The abyss teaches that consequence is not always local. A particle sinking through the water column is local and planetary at once. An animal feeding on sediment is tiny and part of a global cycle. A microbial process in darkness is invisible and climatically relevant. A seafloor disturbance is a patch of mud and a potential change in pathways that extend beyond the patch. The deep refuses the human habit of separating small from important. It keeps putting them back together. Perhaps that is why the falling snow is such a powerful image, not because it is beautiful only, because it is scale made visible. A fleck of white crosses black water, and inside it there may be the memory of sunlight, a trace of carbon, bacteria feeding, a future mouth, a possible sediment layer, a tiny link in climate. The frame looks minimal, the meaning is not. The Black Ocean is often most itself in such minimal scenes. No monster, no eruption, no record depth, only something falling, and everything connected to that fall. Naming is another form of connection. When a new species from the deep is described, the act can seem small beside the size of the ocean. A Latin name, a paper, a preserved specimen, a genetic sequence, a drawing or photograph. But naming brings a life into a human system of recognition. It makes it possible to compare, protect, track, discuss. It gives policy and science a handle, imperfect but necessary. Yet naming also carries risk if we mistake the name for the being. A species name does not contain the animal's world. It does not hold its chemical cues, its pressure, its food, its predators, its reproductive timing, its movements across sediment, its role in a community. It is an entry point, a doorway, not the room. The abyss reminds us that taxonomy is both powerful and humble. Powerful, because without names, much life remains administratively invisible. Humble, because a name can arrive long after the life has been living well without it. There is a tenderness in the best naming, the careful comparison under a microscope, the measurement of small structures, the attention to differences that would be invisible to nearly everyone, the refusal to collapse one organism into another because they look similar at first glance, the patience to say, this life is distinct. Distinction is a form of respect. In the abyss, where so much appears dark, pale, small, or slow to the casual eye, distinction matters especially. Without it, entire communities become blur. Blur becomes expendable. Expendable becomes loss. A name is not enough to save a species. But namelessness makes saving harder. The deep holds many lives still outside our naming. This is not a romantic treasure chest. It is a backlog of responsibility. To discover a species only after its habitat has been altered would be a very modern sorrow. To never discover it at all, because the habitat changed first, would be a quieter loss, perhaps impossible to mourn because the object of mourning never entered language. The abyss is full of possible unmourned losses. That thought should not paralyze. It should sharpen care. There is a way of speaking about the deep as if mystery itself will protect it. It will not. Mystery can attract attention, but it can also create distance. People may admire the unknown and still allow it to be harmed. They may call it alien and then treat alien as outside obligation. They may call it untouched and then fail to notice when it is touched. They may call it vast and assume vastness dilutes harm. Protection requires mystery to become relationship. A relationship with a place below 4,000 meters will never be simple. It will be mediated by data, images, instruments, institutions, and trust. It will depend on people believing witnesses they do not know. It will depend on societies caring about places they cannot visit. That is difficult in an age when trust itself is strained. But the abyss can help rebuild trust if approached honestly. It forces collaboration. No single person can hold it. No single nation can understand it alone. No single technology can translate it fully. The Black Ocean is too large for private certainty. Shared ignorance can become a starting point for shared responsibility. Not ignorance as negligence. Ignorance admitted, measured, reduced carefully. There is dignity in saying we do not know enough. There is also duty in learning more. The abyss does not ask us to choose between humility and knowledge. It asks us to hold them together. Humility without knowledge becomes vague reverence. Knowledge without humility becomes extraction with better maps. Together, they might become care. Might. That word is honest. Nothing guarantees wisdom. The existence of beauty does not guarantee protection. The existence of science does not guarantee restraint. The existence of risk does not guarantee caution. The history of the surface world proves this too many times. Forests were measured before they were cleared. Fisheries were studied while they declined. Rivers were named while they were poisoned. Species were cataloged before they vanished. The abyss offers no automatic rescue from that pattern. It only makes the pattern harder to excuse. Somewhere in the lower water column, far above the abyssal floor but far below sunlight, animals are rising and falling with daily rhythms tied to the surface night. The great vertical migration, among the greatest daily animal movements known on Earth, takes place mostly above the depths this story has stayed with. But it matters here because it reminds us that the deep is layered with motion. Food webs above influence food reaching below. Predators and prey move through twilight. Carbon travels in bodies as well as particles. The abyss is not isolated from the midwater. The Black Ocean is not only bottom. Between surface and seafloor lies a huge volume of living water, much of it unlit, filled with animals that may never touch the bottom. Squid, fish, gelatinous forms, crustaceans, microbial communities, drifting organisms, predators suspended in darkness. Some participate in migrations. Some remain deep. Some make light. Some are nearly transparent. Some are so fragile that nets turn them into evidence too damaged to understand. The midwater is often even harder to imagine than the seafloor. At least the bottom gives the mind a surface. A plain, a ridge, a trench wall. The midwater gives no ground, no horizon, No shelter except distance and darkness. It is a three-dimensional night where up and down matter, but footing does not. Animals live suspended, balanced, drifting, swimming, waiting. Below 4,000 meters, the water above the floor is itself a habitat, not merely the space one passes through to reach mud. A vehicle descending quickly may treat it as transit. Life does not. To midwater animals, the water column is the world. This is an important correction because human exploration often loves destinations. We want the bottom, the vent, the wreck, the trench. But the descent itself passes through inhabited darkness. Every meter may cross lives. The journey is not an elevator shaft. It is habitat all the way down. There is no empty corridor to the abyss, only a corridor we poorly see. The vehicle's lights catch only what comes near. Many animals avoid it. Many are too small, too transparent, too fast, too faint, too far outside the beam. A descent can feel lonely, not because little is there, but because the vehicle is a crude visitor in a vast volume. Again, the old lesson returns. Absence in the frame is not proof of absence in the world. A human life is short beside the abyss, but not irrelevant to it. This matters as the story nears quiet. It would be easy to let the deep make every human concern seem trivial. That would be another mistake. The fact that the abyss is old does not make a person's grief small to the person grieving. The fact that deep currents move over centuries does not make a child's future abstract. The fact that animals live without our attention does not mean our choices fail to matter. Scale should humble, not erase. The abyss does not ask humans to disappear from meaning. It asks humans to stop occupying all meaning. That difference is delicate. A person standing on a ship at night can be tiny and responsible at the same time. Tiny because the ocean below exceeds every sense. Responsible because the civilization that person belongs to can alter what it barely understands. Smallness and power now coexist in us, and the combination is unstable. Perhaps the deepest unease of the Black Ocean is not that it makes us feel small. It is that we are small and powerful. A small body with planetary tools. A surface creature with abyssal reach. A brief species with long-lasting materials. A fearful mind with machines that can cut, collect, illuminate, map, drill, listen, and disturb. The abyss does not solve this contradiction. It displays it. And because it displays it without drama, we have to do the moral work ourselves. No thunder answers from below. Only water. Only pressure. Only the facts we are willing to gather and the restraint we are willing to practice. The sea will not become a teacher automatically. A person can cross it for decades and learn only roots. A company can study it and learn only deposits. A government can map it and learn only claims. A person can watch footage and learn only strangeness. Teaching requires receptivity. The abyss offers conditions. We decide whether they become lessons. One lesson is enough to carry upward. The unseen is not lesser. Everything else can begin there. There is also a lesson in darkness itself. On land, darkness often arrives as an interruption. The power goes out. A storm covers the moon. A room waits for a lamp. Night falls, but morning is already written into the turning of the planet. Darkness, for surface creatures, is usually temporary or local. It belongs to rhythm. Below 4,000 meters, darkness is not rhythm. It is climate. It is architecture. It is the permanent condition inside which bodies have made sense of the world. That permanence changes the meaning of every light that enters. A lamp is not merely illumination. It is weather from another reality. It changes behavior, creates shadows where no broad shadows ordinarily move, reveals colors that may have no function there, and makes the water look emptier beyond the beam, because the beam has taught the eye to expect brightness. The beam is helpful. The beam is misleading. Both truths remain. To understand the abyss, we may need to practice a form of negative attention, Attention not only to what the light shows, but to what the light prevents us from knowing. What animal stayed outside the illuminated field? What behavior changed before the camera approached? What signal was overwhelmed? What pattern appears only when no vehicle is present? What does a habitat look like to its inhabitants, not to an eye adapted for air and day? These questions cannot be answered by imagination alone, but imagination helps us ask them. A good instrument begins with an act of humility. It admits that ordinary human senses are poorly designed for the task. It extends sight, hearing, touch, chemical perception, endurance, and memory. But a great instrument may go further. It may admit that the extension itself changes the encounter, and so it must become more subtle. The future of abyssal science may depend on instruments that behave less like visitors and more like careful neighbors. Quieter, dimmer, longer lasting. More patient. Less hungry for a dramatic image. Perhaps the deep will be known best by machines that can wait. Waiting is difficult for humans, but the abyss makes waiting intelligent. A stationary camera can witness what an active vehicle frightens away. A long-term observatory can capture rare events that an expedition would miss. A quiet hydrophone can hear seasonal patterns. A sensor array can follow changes too gradual for a single cruise. The abyss, which has endured through ages, asks knowledge to stop behaving like a tourist. Tourism of attention is one of the great risks in how modern culture meets the natural world. A place appears, astonishes, circulates, and is replaced by the next astonishment. The deep ocean cannot be protected by astonishment alone. It requires memory after astonishment. It requires institutions after wonder. It requires funding after the trailer ends. It requires people who still care when the image is mostly black. The black frame may be the most honest test. Can attention remain when spectacle recedes? Can care survive subtlety? Can a civilization protect a place that does not entertain it? Below 4,000 meters, these are not abstract questions. They are practical ones. A monitoring program either continues or it does not. A protected area is either enforced or it is paper. A mining code is either precautionary or permissive. A ship is either designed with noise in mind or it is not. A sample is either necessary or merely desired. Data are either shared or hidden. The abyss turns philosophy into logistics. That may be why it feels so severe. It does not let beautiful feelings remain beautiful if they never become behavior. The sea beneath the ship is black, but the choices above it are not. They have names, dates, budgets, signatures, engineering specifications, routes, standards, omissions. The abyss is difficult to see. The decisions that affect it are often visible enough. We cannot blame darkness for everything. And still, after all the policy, machinery, science, and fear, the simplest fact remains the most astonishing. There is life down there. Not life as an exception to the darkness, but life at home inside it. A body moving over sediment. A microbe working inside a particle. A fish sensing a faint vibration. A sponge filtering what the current brings. A worm in bone. A shrimp near heat. A coral growing in cold. An amphipod in a trench, a community where sunlight has no direct authority. The abyss is not waiting for light to become itself. It is already itself. That recognition may be the beginning of a different relationship with the ocean, not the romance of the surface, not the terror of the unknown, not the appetite of the frontier, but the steady awareness that Earth contains vast living darkness, and that our bright world is only one expression of a larger planet. The surface is not the opposite of the deep. It is connected to it. Every wave is above a depth. Every storm moves over hidden terrain. Every breath of oxygen, every climate pattern, every seafood meal, every cable-borne message, every map, every policy, every piece of plastic that escapes a hand, every gram of carbon entering the ocean belongs in some way to the same planetary water. The Black Ocean is not elsewhere. It is beneath the word here. The footage ends. On the screen, the last frame is almost nothing. Snow in the lamp. A hint of sediment. Black water beyond. No dramatic animal remains. No final gesture. The recording stops because a battery or a schedule or a file limit says stop, not because the abyss has finished anything. Outside the frame, the seafloor continues. The animal that left the light continues. The current continues. The particles continue. The pressure remains exact. Morning comes to the ship eventually. The sky pales. The deck brightens. Work resumes. Another station, another deployment, another set of coordinates, another controlled risk lowered into water. Far below, morning does not arrive. The Black Ocean keeps its depth. Not as a secret for secrecy's sake, not as a challenge waiting to be defeated, as a world. A world under the bright skin of Earth. A world where the sun is history by the time particles arrive. A world where animals move through pressure as naturally as birds move through air. A world where the smallest falling fragment can matter. A world that has already entered our future, whether or not we have learned to see it. Beneath 4,000 meters, the ocean does not become nothing. It becomes less available. That is different. And in that difference, the whole mystery remains. The sea above shines. The ship moves on. The horizon opens in daylight, as if the planet were simple again. Below, past the reach of blue, past the last remembered color, past the easy maps of human feeling, the abyss holds its long black weather. Snow falls through it. Stone waits in it. Life feeds, hides, listens, glows, settles, rises, returns. No dawn enters. No applause follows. Only the pressure. Only the cold. Only the dark water carrying on, deeper than ordinary fear, older than any witness now standing in the light, and alive in ways that do not ask to be seen.